Well, good evening. Thank you for being here. And we are getting ready for our, sorry, we just got off of a closed session and we're just a tad bit late. So thank you for your patience. And we are I'll call the meeting to order. And if anyone is on Zoom, we are now on hybrid. And so you can go ahead and raise your hand if you have a public comment for the general public comment or for later on in the agenda. And Ms. Councilmember Pease, will you do the pledge? Thank you so much. And today we have the city attorney on remote. So city attorney, do you have a closed session report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The council did meet in closed session on one matter of real property negotiations with APNs and property as noted on the agenda. Council provided direction as to price and terms and no further reportable action was taken.
Thank you so much. So now we have a presentation from the Central Coast Community Choice Energy, and who will be reporting? That is the question. Okay, great. So we'll have CEO Rob Shaw and Chief Communications Officer Catherine Stedman. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart, Director Marks, Director Johnson, members of the council. Thank you very much for allowing us this time to present. I'm joined, as the mayor mentioned, by Catherine Stedman, our Chief Communications Officer, also by Judy Young and Jenna Espinosa, who are here in San Luis Obispo, working for us and our staff and outreach to our customers. My name is Robert Shaw. I'm the new Central Coast Community Energy CEO. I've been in the position for just a few months now. And I really wanted to take an opportunity to introduce myself and then thank you as a city and as a staff for really being leaders in this space. Whether it is your building electrification efforts, your transportation electrification efforts, or really working closely with our staff to demonstrate the viability of our programs so that those other jurisdictions, we're now 35 members strong, those other jurisdictions can see the opportunity and the viability and see an ability to take the learnings here and export it to their communities. That leadership has been such an important piece as the Central Coast Community Energy has grown to be 35 members, 440,000 customers. So with that introduction, I want to turn you over to the very capable hands of Catherine Stedman, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Let me just get the presentation up.
And let us know if you need a little help.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Catherine Stedman, and I am 3CE's Chief Communications Officer. It's my honor to be here tonight and to highlight Central Coast Community Energy's recent accomplishments and to show where we're headed, as well as the value we bring to you as a member agency and to all of our customers in San Luis Obispo. I wanted to begin with some images of a recent ribbon cutting just this month in Mammoth Lakes for the first geothermal plant to come online within the electric grid that serves most of California, the first in 30 years. 3CE was one of the primary early investors in this project, which gives 100% renewable energy at the critical hours when wind and solar aren't available. This is baseload renewable energy, and it happened because public agencies like ours that your city chose to support were willing partners when it mattered. We serve 95% of customers in our service territory, but how community choice aggregation works still remains a mystery to many of our customers. We, a public agency, obtain the power that serves you. The investor-owned utility, in our case, PG&E, continues to handle transmission, distribution, metering, and billing. CCAs also return revenue to their communities in the form of programs, incentives, and rebates, and can also assist with local job creation and renewable energy development. Our agency has seen tremendous expansion since we formed in 2017. We expanded from Monterey Bay to the entire Central Coast, and your community joined in 2020. Today, 3CE is made up of 35 member agencies throughout the 5 counties, serving more than 400,000 customers, more than 1 million people, and securing over $2 billion in renewable energy and storage agreements, while returning millions in programs funding to our communities. In the year 22 alone, we delivered over 5,000 gigawatt hours of electricity throughout our region. We recently completed enrollment of unincorporated regions of Santa Barbara County and welcomed the city of Atascadero and the county of San Luis Obispo to our agency. Tonight, I'll focus on these 4 major areas, beginning with local control. Community choice aggregation allows governments to have greater control over the type and cost of energy supplied to their communities and ensure that decisions reflect the community's values and goals. Where your power comes from and how you are charged for it is decided by local elected officials. We're making progress on climate goals together as a region, and we've set targets that are far ahead of both the state and federal government to decarbonize our energy supply. Here in San Luis Obispo, you share board seats with Morro Bay and are represented by San Luis Obispo's council member Jan Marks and San Luis Obispo City Manager Derek Johnson on our boards. So now on to rates. Since our inception, we've been able to deliver electricity at competitive rates. We're currently 35% less than PG&E's generation rates, and we expect our competitiveness with the incumbent utility to continue. And now to our efforts to procure clean power. Today, we are at 50% clean and renewable, and on track to be 60% by the year 2025, which is 5 years earlier than the goal set by the state of California. Our strategy commits 3CE to meet 100% of its demand with clean and renewable resources by the year 2030, with balancing on a monthly basis, which is a full 15 years ahead of the goal set by the state. We've executed 19 power purchase agreements for solar, storage, including batteries and compressed air, geothermal, and wind, and are constantly working to increase this portfolio. 5 of our projects came online in 2022 and add up to nearly 280 megawatts of generation and energy storage combined, which is about 22% of our current annual load. Meeting GHG reduction goals is also about electrification. As individuals, the biggest impact that we can make to cut greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality is to replace fossil fuel vehicles with EVs and replace the gas appliances in our homes. As 3CE works to clean the grid, electric cars and appliances will become emissions-free in their operation, and the electricity that powers them will be 100% clean and renewable. And so finally, on community reinvestment. This slide shows our energy program's impact in fiscal year 21-22. But over the past 3 years, 3CE has helped put more than 1,500 new and used electric vehicles on our roads, distributing nearly $4 million in rebates paid to our customers. By electrifying our transportation sector, these EVs have spared more than 6,000 metric tons of regional CO2 emissions. And working with the California Energy Commission, 3CE has delivered rebates to help build more than 1,000 new electric vehicle charging stations for our region. We've also paid to make more than 2,000 new affordable housing units all electric, and that support continues. Residential customers within the city of San Luis Obispo are eligible for rebates up to $4,000 toward EVs and chargers and HVAC and heat pumps for your homes. We also have programs aimed at helping our member agencies partner and advance electrification and stay up to date with building codes that advance electrification. And business-friendly programs designed to electrify new housing, including farm worker housing, to upgrade ag equipment, and to install DCFC Level 3 chargers. To ensure these benefits are within reach for all of our customers, we provide an additional $1,000 to our Electrify Your Ride and Electrify Your Home rebates for income-qualified customers. Nearly $3 million has gone to your community through our public and member agency programs since you joined in 2020. So information on how to take advantage of these offerings is on our website, 3cenergy.org. And thank you so much. With the continued support of your staff and community, 3CE will continue to deliver innovative solutions, impactful programs, and exemplary service along with clean and renewable energy. This concludes my presentation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. That was a great review, and I do have a quick question. With the PSPS, people often ask me if the public safety power shutoff happens, what does that mean now that we have 3CE? Would you please share on that?
Sure. Our role really in those events is to support the IOU in getting the word out to customers. So we do our best to make sure that we are communicating the accurate information about the events and helping customers know when to reduce energy. And of course, if we get to more of a rolling blackout situation, would be communicating about that as well.
Great, thank you. Did you have a question? Maybe? Any other questions? Okay, Councilmember Francis.
Oh, just a comment. I have 3CE's rebates to thanks for my great e-bike that's sitting out front right now. So appreciate those programs and appreciate you getting the word out about them.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Marks.
Yes, thank you. It was a wonderful presentation, and thank you for coming down in person, both of you and local staff. Yeah, 3CE helped City Farm Slow buy an electric, what they call a side-by-side. It's kind of like an all-terrain vehicle, but it's done so much work in terms of allowing this urban organic teaching farm to utilize all 20 acres. So I just want to thank you, and it's been a privilege to work with you. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I too have taken advantage of the 3CE rebates, and so it's wonderful to have those as an opportunity for the community. Wondering about the e-bike incentive or rebate, I guess you could say. I was under the impression that that had ended or had sunsetted temporarily. Is that the case? And if so, is there any plans to bring it back?
Yes, so that rebate has gone away. It was really just about lacking evidence that the e-bikes were taking the place of vehicles. So it was definitely a very popular program. And of course, we're always looking for suggestions about how to expand programs in the future. But I think maybe the cargo bikes that are more equipped to really do the storage, people are still turning to vehicles for grocery shopping and things like that. Could be an area to explore in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, we really appreciate you coming down, as Vice Mayor Mark said, coming in person. We greatly appreciate it, and look forward to when we get to get together next time.
Great.
Thank you. And also, I just want to take this time to thank City Manager and Vice Mayor Marks for being on the board and the Policy Board and the Operations Board. That is so helpful for our entire region, quite honestly. So thank you so much. Okay, next we have the City Manager report, and after that we'll have public comment. So if you have public comment, please make sure you turn in your slip to the City Clerk. There are some behind her, and I think there's some right out front as well. And I'll turn it over to City Manager.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council. And just a quick shout out to our friends at 3CE for coming here tonight. So I have a brief report tonight. You're going to be hearing a lot about economic development, but we move over to the first slide. The City of San Luis Obispo was recognized by the California Association of Local Economic Development at an annual conference in June with an award for merit for our successful economic recovery and resiliency program and the Buy Local bonus program. And so, as you know, during the pandemic, we kind of broke ground, came up with creative ideas, and it's so great to be recognized by CalEd for our work. And you're going to have a chance to meet with the team who's sitting here in the front row to learn more about our overall economic development strategy. I want to update the Council on our developments with our safe parking program. As the Council may recall, that we did establish under the city's emergency proclamation a safe shelter options for individuals and families that were experiencing homelessness during the pandemic. And the railroad safe parking program was allowed to continue operations for 180 days following the end of the declaration. And as you all know, the governor did that early this year in February, which brings us to the conclusion of the authority for the railroad safety site on August 27th. In advance of that, we brought an item to the Planning Commission, Director Tway and the Community Development team to the Planning Commission last week on July 12th. And they unanimously adopted a resolution that allows CAPSLO to act as a safe parking program administrator and continue operations as a rotating safe parking program throughout the community. So it somewhat acts like a master permit. And so we work with faith organizations and other groups to ultimately site those throughout the community. The establishment of any safe parking site requires a director's action permit, and so we'll provide notice within 300 feet of each of the proposed site, and each location shall comply with the safe parking regulations that are promulgated and established in the city's municipal code. Just by way of, just so the public and the community knows, all participants must be enrolled in case management and pass a background check, and then enter into agreement to follow those terms. And then CAPSLO, as our site administrator, is responsible for upholding the neighborhood relations plan. So that's an element you may recall that was a part of the conditional use permit for the Homeless Resources Center, and we condensed that down into a neighborhood relations plan for each safe parking site. So staff will be working with the faith community on proposed locations, and CAPSLO may initially request a permit to operate in some areas. And so I want to let the council know one of the areas that we're exploring is some surplus right-of-way right near the Veterans Memorial Hall on Upper Palm. There's a very generous amount of right-of-way, and so we'll be looking at that area. In addition, as I mentioned before, we'll be working with the faith community. Just to remind the council, is the director reserves the right to elevate a director's action permit to the Planning Commission in the event that there's any major policy or public controversy. And so we've had some discussions with Director Tway, and she'll exercise that authority appropriately if we start to get feedback after the appropriate noticing. I just wanted to let the council know of that significance as we start to wind down the operations of the safe parking program over at Railroad Square. Moving forward, I want to just also check in with the council again on our Welcome Home Village update. This is our encampment resolution funding that was awarded to the county of San Luis Obispo, which unanimously accepted the $13.4 million in resolution funds from the Cal Interagency Council on Homelessness. I think I shared with the council, we were just one of 16 regions to receive this funding, and we were the top highest funded award that was just after the city of San Francisco and the city of San Diego. And so the city, we're a partner, will be a sub-recipient, and we're partnering with the county, Good Samaritan Shelter, and Dignity Moves. Ultimately, the proposal is to provide for housing for 34 interim shelter and 46 permanent supportive housing units on the Department of Social Services site on South Higuera. And so the purpose of tonight's update is just really highlight over the next few months that the county, city, and our nonprofit partners will be initiating some outreach and some meetings with key stakeholders and service providers, and begin holding some learning and listening sessions. And so those will be led by the county, and we'll be there along with our partners, and we'll make sure that we keep the council informed about the progress. Ultimately, what will come back to the city council is there will be an action item for the council in terms of a sub-recipient agreement, because we'll be receiving funding for this effort. So we'll keep the council updated as this outreach effort unfolds. Moving to the next slide, we'll want to just share with the community the SLO City Awards for the $150,000 grant funding to 10 businesses. And so the city of SLO awarded $150,000 to 10 local businesses seeking to support a thriving and a diverse economy. And so the purpose of this grant program is to address really equity gaps within San Luis Obispo and enhance the sense of belonging for all community members, particularly those marginalized communities that we haven't really seen represented in our business community. The city received 32 grant applications in March for over $1 million. And the HRC reviewed the grant applications and ultimately recommended that the city award 10 local grants. And you can see those on the page. Of course, you saw a full preview of that at your last meeting. And the grant program will be administered by the Office of DEI. And we have a 6-month time frame in January, February. And so we'll be sure to bring forward copies of their mid-year reports to see the progress that they've made in terms of the investments and shared partnership with these businesses. Next, I want to share with the council that the city of San Luis Obispo was recognized and received a gold designation from the National Soul Smart program for encouraging growth of clean and affordable solar energy at a local level. And so we know that local rooftop solar allows communities members to reduce their greenhouse gases, enables cost-effective electrification retrofits, and protects people from utility cost increases. We've made the permitting process very fast with our app and the council's support of policy shifts. And so what the Soul Smart designation recognizes is that the city has adopted best practices to advance solar market growth and has made a commitment to using best practices in terms of building permitting, inspection, planning, and zoning and government operations and community engagement. So solar installed in our community recently supports our climate action plan, and also provides additional actions in support of the city's carbon neutrality goals for our community by 2035. And so many of you who've been around for quite some time know what it was like in the early years of rooftop solar and how Byzantine and difficult it can be. So thanks to the community development team and everyone who has really streamlined this process. I hear great feedback from our contractor community that people can walk in and walk out with a permit that same day. So moving on to some other community work that's happening in San Luis Obispo and our SLO in Motion public relations campaign about many of the capital improvement projects that are happening in San Luis Obispo. So we're continuing work on the North Choro Greenway project. And this week we plan to do some underground utility work. And so commuters should expect some traffic delays and road closures between Palm and Mill Streets. We're asking for motorists to be extra attentive and keep keep an eye out for construction workers. There's a pretty constrained roadway these days, and so we're asking for people to be especially patient as pedestrians and cyclists try to navigate all the construction that's happening out there. Work is going to continue on the west side of Broad Street between Ramona Drive and Mission Street, and includes some permanent no parking signs, temporary striping, and the removal of and installation of new speed humps on Farini Road, Ramona Drive, and Broad Street. I think the council received some communications about the shift that's happened, and that was intentional as part of our work that the council adopted as part of the North Truro Greenway Plan. And so these should be reinstalled shortly. And on those streets as well, we're asking for people to exercise some patience as there will be temporary road closures, and then pedestrians can and should expect side street changes or side street detours as well. Moving to the next slide, we have an update on some of our other work in San Luis Obispo on pedestrian crossings. And so these improvements were complete last week. The 4 locations include Johnson, Sydney, King, South, and Osos, Islay, and Broad Islay. And so we've already received multiple comments indicating that speeds have already gone down on Johnson Avenue without really any noticeable impacts in terms of congestion, but we're going to continue to monitor, and that was our commitment for this project, and we'll make sure that we bring back any recommendations as part of our permanent paving program for the summer of 2024. We do have some planned ribbon cuttings for these locations because we know that they were very important to the community as they provide critical crossing points for schools and other important facilities, and that's planned for August 31st at 3:30 p.m. and more details to follow with formal invitations. The council likely has been following, and appreciate our fire department has been providing updates to the council about CAL FIRE Office's State Fire Marshal proposed changes to our official map for our fire hazard severity zones. And this is really what was previously called your WUI, your Wild Urban Land Interface. And so the state is requesting feedback. And so SLO City community members wish to provide feedback to the state on their map. They're doing this work, are encouraged to do so by August 9th of this year. And if you'd like to view the proposed updated and provide public comment, you can visit CAL FIRE's website, or you can click on the link that's up on the screen tonight. Sharing more work, what's happening in our Parks and Recreation Department. The Parks and Recreation Department is very active during the summer months. Many of you, I understand, were out on Rec Saturday this past weekend. We had over 700 people that were at the pool enjoying Sinsheimer Pool. It was a lively day over at the park between the Blues game, the pool being activated, other activities in the park. And so some of that work is going to continue this weekend. Coming up on Sunday, the 23rd, we have historic tours of the Jack House, and you can enjoy a docent-led tour of the historic Jack House between 1 to 4. No registrations required, and if you haven't been in that facility, it's a great way to learn about San Luis Obispo history, but also to see one of the gems of our city. And with that, Madam Mayor, that concludes the city manager report for this week, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, as always, filled with lots of really good stuff. Thank you so much. Really quickly, on the last one, the fire area, the insurance concerns that we've heard from the community a little bit about if the area changes, the severity changes, then would it affect their insurance rates? Do you have any update on that?
So, Madam Mayor, various different insurance companies, how they calculate ultimately the insurance risk and ultimately the premiums that are charged to their customers is a variety of factors. And so they look at a variety of different factors. It isn't solely just the risks associated with the map. Certainly the map that the state is generating does give cause for concern. And there have been other communities that have directly correlated the changes in the map with with how their insurance has been, their premiums have been adjusted, or they've lost coverage. I know that this is front and center and at the state level, and the insurance commissioner has been looking at this, and there are alternatives at the state level to get state insurance. I understand that that level of coverage isn't quite what you can buy and achieve in the private market, but nevertheless, what we've been trying to do here at the local level is making sure that there's an accurate assessment of the risk, and that the accurate assessment of the risk is then in turn appropriately depicted on the maps. And so if there's any questions that people have in terms of if they're struggling with insurance, you can always reach out to our emergency services manager, James Blattler. We're happy to provide some assistance in terms of resources if there's any impacts in terms of what happens at the state level.
Great, thank you so much. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you. Yeah, just a quick question on the shift in the safe parking out of Railroad Square into a more kind of dispersed model. Do we anticipate, and I know that we're still establishing sites, but do we anticipate having an equivalent number of spaces to the previous location?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Francis, that's our hope. I think our hope is actually to exceed what we have. There'll be a memo that we were just wrapping up today that's going to give more details. We've had some real success in our safe parking program. We've had a number of reunifications and also people put in permanent housing because of our partnership with CapsLo. I'm actually with the community where I worked in previously. We had more of a dispersed model, and it was very successful. It wasn't as concentrated, but we know, to get to the heart of your question, is that there are more people out there that are looking for the program than we currently have spaces. And so we're trying to create ultimately low barrier and then also a diversity of sites that then give people ample opportunity to pick the site that works for them and then also work for the neighbors around them. So the hope is to provide the number of spaces at the current location and more.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I believe the number from CapsLo from May was 5 people from Railroad Square were housed. So it's really been an awesome program. So thanks.
Thank you. I think the case management aspect really helps quite a bit to have that supportive services around someone. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, not really a question, but more of a thank you and a shout out to the staff and people that have been doing all the infrastructure work on all of our streets, with all the curb cuts looking great in the North Truro neighborhood, and the South King Crossing just looks amazing. And I can personally speak to many people that I've seen using the refuge lane on Johnson that was newly installed on that end, and how fast they put in all those improvements. Traverse that area daily, and I think all of the old paint and new paint and improvements were put in a week or less. So just great to see all that, and looking forward to more.
Thank you. I agree. As someone who goes on Johnson quite often, that has been an amazing change. And I look forward to the school year when we have the students actually being able to cross at Sidney and Johnson and not kind of fearful for their lives. So it's really good. Well, thank you very much. And I don't think there are any other questions or comments. So we'll move forward to public comment on items not on the agenda. Thank you, 3C. Do you have any public comment?
Yes, we have one. Hans Hirschberger.
Great, thank you.
All right. Hello, City Council members. My name is Hans, and I am a resident of San Luis Obispo. Seeing as there was discussion last week on housing and parking policy, and there is an economic plan presentation scheduled for this meeting, I briefly wanted to talk about a subject that I believe pertains to all three, that of parking mandates. I'm asking you to consider abolishing them. So what are parking mandates? For those of you who don't know, these are also known as minimum parking requirements. They are laws that require new buildings to include a fixed number of off-street parking spaces based off an assumed maximum demand for parking generated by the building's use. For housing, these are typically seen as parking spots per unit. In commercial, these could be parking spots per square foot or parking spots per an item. So like at a hospital, it could be a parking spot per a bed. At a restaurant, it could be a parking spot per table. These are found in a city's municipal code. So why am I asking you to abolish them? Well, parking mandates stifle compact types of development and missing middle housing. They are one of the main contributors of the sprawl seen in the United States. They are based off of 1950s guesswork and some laughably bad and sad, I guess, science and statistics. It's estimated, because we can't measure them, there are too many, there are an estimated 4 parking spots for every car in the United States. This is an extreme waste of our valuable land. I don't think this is a polarizing stance. I think this makes sense from many sides, actually. Abolishing parking mandates does not abolish parking. It simply allows the free market to determine how much parking a development needs, rather than a one-size-fits-all government mandate. So, where can you learn more about this? Well, there's a couple of books I would recommend. The first is a bit more of a fun, humorous read. It's Parking Paradise by Henry Grabar. If you want the original in-depth book on the topic, I suggest The High Cost of Free Parking by Donald Shoup. You could also look at a plethora of cities that in the recent years have been removing their parking mandates. Some of the most recent are Culver City, Raleigh, North Carolina, Nashville, Anchorage, Portland. This list seems to be growing monthly. In conclusion, I believe the abolition of parking minimum requirements is synchronous and essential to the aims of this city council and the benefit of its citizens. I won't claim that this will solve all of our housing problems or economic goals overnight, but I will tell you it is a foundational step on the path to doing so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other city clerk?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just thinking about that, all of your comments, and recently we're just talking about some of the books and articles from Donald Shoup, so thank you for that. Do you want to share, City Manager? I see that you have your mic on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So you may recall at the tail end of your deliberations on developing the financial plan for 23-25 that there was a lot of discussion about parking minimums, or in some case, parking maximums. And so that is a work program item that we'll be undertaking in the next 2 years. I'm trying to track down feverishly during the meeting when we were going to bring that forward to give you a timetable. I wasn't able to locate that, but we'll email back to the council, and if the speaker wants to give us his contact information, we can provide that information so ultimately they can participate in that process.
Great, thank you so much. We've had a lot of conversation about parking, and we will have a lot more conversation about parking, I'm sure. So next we get to do the consent agenda. Consent agenda is typically items that are non-controversial. In case anyone has anything they feel is a little more controversial, would like to have any more conversation about, does any city manager, or sorry, council person have a comment? Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. I would like to pull item 6E, the North Broad Street Neighborhood Park, for comment. I don't know if it'll need separate vote, but perhaps we just pull it for discussion.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
I was going to say the same thing, so thank you.
Okay, that works. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and move forward on 6A, B, C, D, and F. Can we do public, do we have any public comment on any of
Yes,
those
we have
items?
one on 6B.
Great, thank you so much.
I'm sorry.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. This item on 6B might go a little almost unnoticed, but this is an incredibly important item for our city. As someone who sat on the panel for siting our new courthouse, I want to say thank you for what you, the council, and staff have done to support and assist in keeping our courthouse in downtown. I know you are aware, but for those who aren't, this is an incredibly important item to support our local economy. On behalf of the SLO Chamber and our business community, thank you for all that you did and are doing to keep our courthouse right here in downtown. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
That's it.
Okay. I do have a comment on 6E. No, sorry, not 6E, sorry. 6B, sorry, that is what we're talking about. I think, are we talking about, it's Broad Park, 6E? Okay, that's what we're pulling up, sorry. I have so many comments here that I'm trying to figure out which ones I'm doing here. So 6B, I have to say I very much agree with the public speaker that having the courthouse downtown is so vital, and it is kind of like, check, we're done, because it's non-confrontational, but I think it's really important to understand that having all of the employees of the court, as well as all the visitors of the courthouse in the happy and sad moments, that this is really important. And I'm thankful for everyone who sat on the siting committee and our city manager and staff who continue to fight for this to stay downtown. So just wanted to say thank you. Councilmember Shoresman.
I'm just happy to make a motion to move approval of the consent agenda if we're ready, minus 6E.
Perfect. Councilmember Francis.
I'll second.
Wonderful. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease? Yes. Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, and the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. So now we'll chat about 6E. Who would like to go first? Councilmember Pease?
Sure, thank you so much. I'm excited about the park overall and concerned about the cost increases, and I'm hoping we can maybe hear a little bit more from staff about if there's ways to bring the work either in-house, or what would be the impact of delaying and re-advertising. I think we've covered a fair amount of it in correspondence, but I want to make sure that we're all, I don't know, it's just challenging for me. At what point do you just say, gosh, it just has escalated more than we can do? So I think I'm generally supportive, but, and I'm not even sure that I have
An actual question. I know.
An actual question as much as maybe just a deliberation. Maybe we have all the information we need, and I just want to do a double check with my colleagues.
Well, I think I asked it in my agenda review, and so I think it would be great to have city manager or whatever appropriate staff to share about the lagoon. I know we have in correspondence, but I just think it's good to have out loud. I understand that Laguna Lake would be something that has 2 years later now, it's going to take longer, and we have a whole new construction that has to be done. But the Laguna Lake Dog Park, I mean, the amount of people who have been looking for this to happen is so long, and so many people have wondered why in the heck this isn't done already, and why do we not have more dog parks as a whole. So I feel really uncomfortable about this consent item. Thank you, Mr. Horn.
Madam Mayor, members of council, thank you so much for bringing me up to talk about the Broad Street Park. I totally agree with what you guys are thinking. You know, we didn't have a very favorable bid climate. We had to go out to bid multiple times. We got one bid on it. So you do have staff's best professional recommendation in front of you. We believe that awarding a contract, we believe that moving forward with this project will provide the lowest cost park to the community by moving forward with it. That being said, we did look at a funding regime to move forward the Broad Street Park, and we really looked at the existing CIP, and we looked at what parks dollars were already programmed that we could use, that we could get out on the street for the community to have benefit of before we looked at other sources. And we found money in let's see here, the project account that we're pulling from. So we looked at that, we found that, and basically what we wanted to do was keep on moving forward with the Laguna Lake Dog Park, knowing that we are about 9 months from being in a place that we could even begin to kind of estimate the dollar amount and move forward with a construction bid. And so we wanted to, our recommendation to you was to move forward with the Broad Street Park, allow us to design the dog park and get it to a place where we could bid it and bring forth a funding recommendation for you, understanding that both parks are important to the community.
Thank you. Councilmember Shoresman, I would say there.
Oh, yeah, I'm not moving.
I wasn't going to pull this item, but now that I have the opportunity to ask a question, and I did, I appreciate the answer to my question about Laguna and how that interplays with this project. But I guess I'm a little bit confused as to why it seems like we were ready to move forward with Laguna and we were allocating the money that we needed for it, but now it sounds like maybe we weren't as far through the planning process.
Madam Mayor, if I could invite Director Vacan, he's probably closest to the planning and where we are in terms of the estimates. I would say he can best give you that information.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, City Manager, Madam Mayor, council members. My partner here is correct. We are in the planning phase, and it's really a decision on priorities. The dog park right now is in concept design, and we're working on the construction designs. We have some estimated costs that we're assuming are going to be in there, but without full design, we can't really make that really full educated guess at this point. Additionally, we have different funding sources that you're familiar with our park development funds. We have Quimby funds as well as park impact funds. So we were fortunate enough to have outlined money in our blueprint master plan for Laguna Lake support or blueprint projects. We were able to kind of reallocate that fund to support the additional $775,000 in Broad Street. And we're able to use, because of the proximity of Laguna Lake Park with the San Luis Ranch and our Quimby Fund kind of mandate of our kind of radius for that, to still have funds available to support the dog park project. Again, we don't know the full cost at this point, but we want to make sure that we can keep everything in motion and still moving forward. So we're just sort of shifting some of the appropriated funds without really taking it away from the dog park. It's just moving it ahead to North Broad Street and then looking at that other bucket to kind of shift money into that one. And again, we'll hopefully have a better educated guess in about 6 to 8 months.
So just to make sure I understand, so we're at the same place that we would have been with Laguna.
Correct.
Regardless,
yes, sorry.
in terms
Laguna
of
Lake, the dog park itself, yeah, nothing has shifted in that timeline. We've got, I think, 6 different park projects going on right now, and that one is in the queue for the 50% construction design.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So in the borrowing of the money doesn't affect the project, either project in that sense?
Not its current status, no.
Okay,
exactly.
Thank you. City Manager?
I think just to give you a broader context, what largely is the downstream implications is just the overall funding availability for park projects in general. And I think, this is a larger conversation that I want to tee up for the council probably in the December, January timeframe, is hopefully we start to see some ebbing of inflationary pressures and hopefully some calming of the bid climate that give us a sense of ultimately where we are with our overall capital improvement program, because we've seen some dynamics that we didn't anticipate when we put together the CIP program in last year, and really most importantly, when the voters looked at Measure G in November of 2020. And so we've got to have a kind of a re-leveling conversation with the council and the community to really kind of do some level setting on this. But that's a longer proposition. But I think the most important thing you've heard tonight is that this doesn't have any immediate implications for the dog park.
Yeah. Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, it's hard for me to imagine how transferring $750,000 from the dog park would not have any impact on it. I know that there's a nonprofit that's organized around getting that project going. And I am wondering if it is not possible to just go full speed ahead with the dog park and the Broad Street Park, both. Let's just pretend that you had to do them both and not sacrifice one for the other. How would you do that?
Great question, Vice Mayor. We are moving forward. There hasn't been a delay in the design or the construction document preparation for the Laguna Lake Dog Park. Once we have those 50% documents, we'll have a better idea on the actual cost associated with the project. And the nonprofit group that you're referencing is doing fundraising as well. And they've been asking what can they contribute and what are we expecting? We don't have that answer at this time. The nice thing is that we did have funds allocated from the Blueprint Master Plan for improvements, and that was able to just be shifted over currently as a priority for North Broad Street without taking away the funds available for the dog park project. It's just going to be coming from a different park development fund or the Quimby funds because it's in that neighboring area that wouldn't be I guess, associated or be allowed to be moved all the way to the other side of town, since it's not a community-style park, it's a neighborhood park.
Right.
Yeah. So I think for the confidence is we're still moving forward with all our park projects as we are right now until we finally get the actual, project costs to then make potentially some challenging decisions, or as City Manager Johnson stated, our economy is in a better place and our physical health contingency plan is in a different status as well.
Well, how do you know the other project is over budget if you don't know how much it's going to cost?
For the dog park?
Yeah.
We're just doing internal estimates right now on what the amenity of the design and concept from the feedback of our surveys and our community outreach at this point.
What if you just only had $800,000? What if you budgeted the way that people who have families have to budget? What if you only had $800,000? Would it be possible to do the basics for the dog park?
We don't have those hard costs at this time for fencing, shade, or the landscape improvements to actually make that educated decision.
Yeah, I think we're still at the preliminary phase of designing the dog park. I think what we quickly realized is we asked the community for its hopes and dreams of a dog park, and we got that. And now we've come up with an estimate that far exceeds that, I think, what the budget was initially. And so if I wasn't clear, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Marks, the shifting of the funding for Broad Street Park, we will have funding available when it comes time to build the dog park in Laguna Lake. We are going to have to make some decisions about priorities, and that's a process we intend to have with the group that's been very interested in the dog park. And there will squarely be a role for them to play in terms of fundraising. Typically, the models that I've looked at is that the city will provide the basic amenities, the bathrooms, the fencing, the irrigation, the grading, all of the public works kind of stuff. And then there'll be fundraising efforts by the dog community and pet community to put in ramps and other amenities that make it fun for agility and other types of activities for dogs. And so we're probably going to make a steep ask because those are likely the areas which we'll need to deprioritize to meet the budget, Councilmember Marks, that you've outlined.
Thank you. I'm not happy with the idea of transferring the money from the dog park over to the Broad Street Park.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of both projects. I just don't, I feel like
I'm a fan of all 6 of our projects.
The decision-making about the necessity to do that, it seems to me it's all based on conjecture and estimates and, we don't know and all that, but the money is real.
Absolutely. So, I think the money is actually there's 3 different fund accounts.
Mhm.
We're just moving one account that was appropriated for the dog park to North Broad, but we still have funds in the other park and development and park improvement fund balances to make up that $775,000 that we moved out to North Broad Street.
So what kind of guarantees would the community have that it's not, that this transfer of funding will not delay or diminish the plans for the dog park?
All I can say is we are still moving forward with our design firm in the design. We have a PRC meeting on August 16th, and we're going to be discussing the final concept plans that were feedback from both Emerson Park, Dog Park, and Rigetti Ranch Park.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just ask to follow up with that? So I think the question is like with the dreams, the hopes and dreams, the bells and whistles.
Yeah.
We would have that potentially if we didn't build the Broad Street Park.
There would be $775,000 plus the other budgeted up to what 1.6 million for the city for a council to reallocate or
But
decide
then that
what to
other
spend on
neighborhood
that.
won't have their park. So,
Correct.
okay, just
Yeah.
trying to make sure
If that
processing. Councilmember Pease.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and maybe this is for Mr. Horn, to hear a little bit more about maybe alternative delivery kinds of methods. This North Broad Street Park that we started out with, 400, 500,000, added some, and even the engineer's estimate, 775,000, only able to get the one bid at over 1.4 million, so kind of doubling. So I guess what I'm wondering is, if we do reject in this moment, is there some phased-in way that the city could take point within Public Works to be able to provide kind of a basic layer for that original 500,000 and be able to come back with options for maybe the public garden piece that waits, or kind of break it down. I'm just with the only one bid in this kind of environment, I'm just maybe we have other ways to be thinking about how we can bring this kind of project to fruition.
Sure. If council were to ask me what the next steps might be if we didn't want to award this contract tonight, I would say that the next best thing that we could do would be to re-advertise the project and see if we got more bids on it. That will obviously delay it, and it's a risk, it's a gamble. So you're losing time, and your CPI is increasing, so that might not be it. The second best thing that I'd recommend to council would be to break it apart in some fashion, to phase it in some way. And I don't have those answers of what that would look like right now, but that would likely, we would have to prioritize this work over another project to be able to put the resources on it. So that will delay 2 projects. What's the cost benefit of that? I don't know if we're getting there by doing that. So if we want to try to save money, I think the most fiscally prudent thing is to move forward concisely with the project that we want to build and execute it well. I think that's our best way of saving money. If we want to kind of rethink what we want for our park system and delaying it and doing something else, we could definitely do that. But I don't think it's going to save the money that we want it to.
So does this feel, obviously it's staff recommendation, so I guess I know the answer, but does it feel like $1.4 million worth of work to do that park?
It's amazing what things feel like these days. The costs are going up. If you were asked me a year ago, I would not say that this project would come in at this cost, but things are coming in more expensive. I do believe that we are taking the most fiscally prudent action by doing this if we want both parks. It's kind of I think it's not a fiscal question of are we being the most responsible. I think it's more of a question of do we want or need both of these parks right now? And I think the community's told us that we do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think it would be a really tragic mistake not to approve this bid that's offered today. What? All right. So I'm not going to ask any more questions, but I already said that's my opinion, and I will talk about that later after public comment if there is any. Thank you.
City Manager.
And Madam Mayor, if at the end of the day, I think that what Mr. Horn said is, I think we either approve the project and move forward or not approve it. If you don't approve it, then the direction may be to go find alternatives funding sources. And so we could, that is an option as well, if the council wanted to do that. Where we pull that money from, it'd probably be cannibalizing other projects, or looking at other funds that we've committed out in the 5-year forecast. And so there isn't a lot of options. We felt like this was the least impactful, all of them. And I understand the hand wringing that's going on here, because we did the same thing at the staff level. And so that's another alternative for you as well, as we could always go out the grant route if we want to do that. Understanding, we have been successful, Emerson and Mitchell and other areas, but that's more long-term and kind of unknown.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, is there any public comment?
No, there's not.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, this park, this Broad Street Park has been in the works for at least 10 years, maybe 15. I just want to say that the neighborhood is changing over. There are a lot more young families. I think there will be people walking and biking to the park. And I think this is one of the situations where the city has raised expectations and made promises to the community. And if we backpedal now, I think there's going to be a huge trust issue in that neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that's been impacted by the Greenway, North Truro Greenway. So despite my reservations about the dog park, I strongly support the staff recommendation for item 6E.
Thank you, Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I was just going to say that all of our parks have had a huge amount of planning going into them, but I know that I saw this park as a planning commissioner. I don't even remember now. Well over 2 years ago, when it was in the initial design phase. And so I know this is a long time coming. And while I struggle, I think as much as all of you, about the crazy price increases that we're seeing and the doubling of costs of things, if the team says that they still feel like we can, move forward with the Laguna Lake Dog Park, and that this is not going to impact funding for that, and that process will continue on at the same pace that was kind of originally planned, then, for now, I believe that they will do their best to make that happen, and we'll cross that bridge when that bid proposal comes in, and hopefully we'll be at a different place where things aren't still, cross fingers, knock wood, doubling like they have on this project.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you, everyone, and hand wringing is the right word for me, and my colleagues, it sounds like, as well. And I will go ahead and support the park. We're kind of a get her done, and to build in new delays and not have any guarantee that it's going to do something different. And I know we've had this conversation a lot, just in terms of in this bid environment. I think we need to continue to look at all those additive bid alternates. I know that we've been incorporating, looking at, are there other bid delivery or project delivery, prime subcontract kinds of models where the city has a different kind of role, maybe seeking out and having just some kind of a mentorship to bring in new subcontractors, like especially in that landscape earthworks kind of field, because this is not about material cost a ton. So maybe we need more folks on that. But that's for the future. Let's get the park built. And if there's no others, I'll go ahead and move approval.
I was just going to add that I feel like we're kind of in that place where, when you buy a new house and you wanted to get the really cool new dining room floor furniture, and now you're instead of folding chairs. And I think I still a little bit worry about Laguna, and I guess as the comment you made earlier, City Manager, around grants, maybe we start looking at that now for Laguna Lake Park, since we seem to be continually in this road. And I get it, if we postpone this, construction is not going down, so costs are not going down. We have not seen that happen and won't probably. So I will also support that. Vice Mayor Marks?
Was that a second? Otherwise, I'll second it.
You can second.
All right, I'll second it.
All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Begrudgingly, yes. That's a 5-0. Thank you so much for your hard work and answering all of our last minute questions. We're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll see you back in 10. All right. Well, thank you for enjoying your break. And we are getting ready to talk about the Economic Development Strategic Plan. Looking forward to the presentation. Lee Johnson, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'll kick. Totally okay. I'll just kick it off really briefly. Thank you for having us here this evening. We're really happy to be here to be able to bring the plan forward. This has been a long time in the making. We had originally planned to update our Economic Development Strategic Plan as a part of the 1921 financial plan, but obviously we needed to redirect our economic development focus during that time to be able to respond to the pandemic. What I can say, though, is that during that time period, we did a lot and we learned a lot and we built and strengthened a lot of relationships in the community. And I do think that our work during that time heavily informed the plan that you all have before you this evening. As the pandemic subsided and the economic shifts that it created became more clear, we restarted the effort in December of 2022. And I'm super grateful to our economic development and tourism team, Lee Johnson and Molly Kano, in addition to our consultants from TIP, who are going to be able to meet in a moment, that led an effort that connected with more community members than ever before to help chart the course for the future of our economy and the community. It's mentioned in the report and the plan. I think it's worth mentioning as well here that the San Luis Obispo economy is certainly affected by macroeconomic forces that are largely outside of the city's control. So the overall cost of housing, interest rates, inflation, they all play a real role in the lives of community members in San Luis Obispo. And I think it's also important to mention that as our major city goals are highly interconnected, some of the work that's critically important to economic development, like housing, has entirely separate work programs and entirely separate tasks associated with that. And those are found as a part of those individual major city goal work plans. And so ultimately what you have before you tonight in terms of the economic development strategic plan are two things. One, things that are within the levers of a local government to be able to influence or control as it relates to our local economy. And then what we think is the best thinking on employee, business, and community-based programs to move our economy forward. And with that, I'm happy to hand it over to Lee and the team for the balance of the presentation.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much for having us tonight. Very, very excited to cover the update to the Economic Development Strategic Plan. I'm going to go through some of the history and the background, then I will turn it over to the TIP team to cover the process and what we went through, and then the details of the plan itself. So a little bit of background. Our first work in economic development was started in 1995 when we started the economic development and the natural resources positions. Some people called us the twins at that point in time. And that was really focused on sales tax generation. That was big box stores, that was car dealerships, making sure we had the base to fund the services that our community wanted. And then we had the 2008, 2009 downturn, and we really saw that the city of San Luis Obispo, our jobs base was smaller than it needed to be to function as a community. So we started focusing on what we called at that time head of household jobs. Then we moved forward to 2015 and we did a limited update because we were doing the loose land use and circulation element update. There was a lot of development, what is now Avila Ranch, San Luis Ranch, Rigetti Ranch, Hotel Cerro, Hotel Slow. All of those things were coming through, so there was a lot of focus on our processing and how we move big projects through the system. So you fast forward to 2023, a lot of things have happened, and it's time for a major update. And that's because there's a lot of changes in economic development, the theory and the practice, and what's happening in the community, and I'll touch on those a little bit more later. So our current economic development strategic plan, it's as all of our plans in San Luis Obispo, it's built on meaningful public engagement, comprehensive data gathering and analysis, and it so far has been focused on creating a system that supports and sustains industries that create head of household jobs, development, innovation, and just for clarity, a head of household job has been defined as income level above 50,000, a career ladder, an education level and technical skill, employer-sponsored benefits, and stability. So a job that meets any of those four of those five criteria would be considered in this plan a head of household job. The current plan had 4 overarching strategies: breaking down barriers to job creation, actively supporting knowledge and innovation, promoting and enhancing the San Luis Obispo quality of life, and building on existing efforts and strengthening regional partnerships. The plan was, up till now, very successful. We created more jobs, we reduced our permitting turn times, we created more businesses. Our average wages went from 43,000 to 63,000. So that plan has done its job, and now it's, there's times have changed a bit. What's changed since 2015? A lot. Work is evolving due to the pandemic and other reasons. I don't work like my dad did, and my son won't work like I do. And it's just a lot of change. The generations, the way people look at things has to be addressed. Economic development is evolving systemically as well as locally. Sales tax generation, things like that. It has really changed. It's about not only traditional economic development, but diversity, equity, inclusion, sustainability, things like that, the holistic look at what you're doing with the economy. Our community is evolving. You can see by our goal-setting process, there's been more focus on sustainability and diversity, equity, inclusion from the community, and the city organization has responded to that by adding new functions, new people, and evolving our planning processes to make sure we take that into account. So here I'll turn it over to Jeff from TIP and let him go from there.
Thank you, Lee. Mayor and council members, it's so good to see all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Jeff Marcel. I'm a senior partner with TIP Strategies, and I'm joined by Mishka Parkins, who's a consultant with our team. We have really been looking forward to having this conversation with you. I want to give you a quick reminder about who we are. TIP Strategies is a nationally recognized economic development and workforce development strategic planning firm. We can go to the next slide. Our company's 28 years old, and during that 28-year history, we've worked in over 350 communities around the country to help them analyze their economies, but also to help them build strategic plans to maintain a healthy economy, to grow a healthy economy for the people that live in those communities. I will also share this with you. Because we get a chance to work with local governments on a routine basis, I will tell you, we have been impressed at every turn by the staff here at the City of San Luis Obispo. You all are incredibly well served. The level of expertise, the level of passion, dedication to this community is extraordinary, and that doesn't exist everywhere. And so it has been a true partnership in working with everybody at the team, so it's been a pleasure. Let's talk a little bit about the project that we have underway. This has been the project goal that we have had in front of us throughout the entire project. It's about, we know this is an update, and this is about continuing to advance the economic vitality of the city and develop strategies that strengthen the city's economic development efforts while integrating the principles of sustainability, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This has been the project timeline, and we started last year, December of last year. It's been an 8-month-long project. This project throughout its entire existence has been really driven by data gathering, looking at statistical data, but also by stakeholder engagement, having as many conversations with folks as we possibly could. And we've also been fortunate because we've been guided by an exceptional steering committee. So, and here we are today. Let's go to the next slide. you heard me talk about how this process has been driven in part by stakeholder engagement, and we wanted to summarize the stakeholder engagement that has taken place. We've done multiple one-on-one interviews with leaders across the city, but we've also done a whole series of roundtables and focus groups and input sessions with folks from across the community. We've done 13 of those. And they've been on a whole host of different topics. And we've had over 275 people participate in those activities. We also did a survey to the community. I hope all of you took advantage of that and filled the survey out. We had over 980 responses to that survey. That's an outstanding number, especially related to the size of the population of the city. That's a very impressive number. And we've done multiple tours across the city to make sure that we spent time in every neighborhood to understand what was going on in the city. But we also, as you heard me say earlier, we are a very data-driven firm. And so we spend a lot of time looking at statistical data to make sure that we understand what's going on from that frame of reference. So we actually built 30 different data sets, and they focused on the categories of population and demographics, and on economics and industry data, on talent and workforce data, as well as environmental data. And all of those data sets are available to anyone right now because they're posted on the city's website. Go to the next slide. And expanding on the survey that was done, this is an example of one of the questions and the responses to the survey. The survey was, we actually had 16 questions as a part of the survey. It was open for an entire month. And this too, all of the questions are available on the city's website as well. And this all led us, all of this work, all of this data gathering, all of these conversations have led us to a handful of key findings. And here are the key findings that we wanted to share with you, and I'll just summarize them briefly. Quality of place is a priority for everyone in San Luis Obispo. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as sustainability, are very important to the city's approach for economic vitality. Cal Poly has a significant influence in the community. SLO's visitor economy is absolutely critical. It's a critical economic driver. Systemic challenges impede talent retention and attraction. Really what we're talking about here is cost of living. And then lastly, the city should make sure to take a strategic approach to commercial development, given that there is a limited amount of commercial space remaining. And so all of these key findings really have helped point us in the direction of the content that's in the strategic plan. And so with that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Mishka to walk you through the content of the strategic plan. So Mishka, it's all yours.
Thank you, Jeff. Madam Mayor, council members, good to see you all. Thank you so much for having us. So we are going to start here at the ground level. So all of what Jeff mentioned in terms of all of that extensive stakeholder engagement, all of the community input, all of that really helped us to start to build out this plan framework, right? So this is base level where we're starting at. The framework, it contains 3 main elements, and these 3 elements are really the foundation for the entire plan. So all of what we've created in terms of strategies all tie back to one or all of these 3 elements here. So in the creation of this framework, we really leaned on not just the city departments, but we also worked with external partners as well. We share the framework with Cal Poly, representatives from the chamber. So it was an iterative process. We've gone through it several times and made several updates. So we start off here with really a mission statement, and that mission statement, it provides us with strategic direction for the plan, and it really helps us to build that context for how we actually get to those individual strategies. The second component, the guiding principles, I'll go into a bit more detail on these on the next slide. You'll be able to see the actual definition for each of the guiding principles, but we essentially have 5. So that's economic resilience, equitable and inclusive economic development, sustainable economic development, which we'll get into a bit more in detail because that has more of a dual meaning that we'd like to expand on in the next slide. Next, looking at a holistic approach, and then a regional collaboration. So the third element is around the major pillars. And the major pillars, we really think about those as just buckets of where the strategies just naturally fall. So in talking to folks and being able to get their feedback and gather all of those findings, we found that these ideas kind of lined up in these three major categories or three major areas. So in terms of the guiding principles, economic resilience, it's exactly as it sounds. So it's really about creating that sort of business environment that allows current businesses to be able to thrive in the face of disruptions, whether that be an economic downturn, whether that be a natural disaster. Equitable and inclusive economic development, that's really around ensuring that as the city continues to grow, that all of the city's residents are able to participate and benefit from that growth as well. And sustainable economic development here, as I mentioned, this has more of a dual meaning where there is focus on both the climate, considering the city's current goals around sustainability, as well as just sustainability of systems and the ability to manage all of those processes and tools and resources that are in place that are able to hold the city up and contribute to its economic growth. Around a holistic approach that's really looking at both continuing to work with internal, so cross-departmentally and externally as well, to ensure that as the plan moves forward, there are partners that the city can turn to. Around regional collaboration, that's really expanding. The city has been working quite a bit with regional partners like Reach. So the idea here is just to make sure that that's continued and where possible start to expand those partnerships to expand its reach. Okay. Let's try that down. There you go. All right, so those three major pillars, I'll give you just quick definitions of each of the pillars here, but on the following slides, I'll go into a bit more detail in terms of what those strategies actually look like and provide a few examples as well. So each of the pillars have 5 top-level strategies, and each of those 5 or 4 top-level strategies, and each of those top-level strategies have more detailed examples and tasks and action items below them. But that first one around business and entrepreneur vitality is really about focusing in on that local business environment. Honing in on current business owners, as well as turning the focus on entrepreneurs as well, to make sure that they're able to thrive, to adapt and innovate regardless of the challenges that they face, and they're able to maximize on the opportunities that are available to them. Placemaking and promotion. Jeff mentioned quality of place being a huge factor, something that we heard a lot in our stakeholder engagement. So we want to make sure that the city continues to focus on that to ensure that the residents, not just residents, but visitors, can take advantage of that. We're recommending here that there's an effort to increase awareness on those local amenities, and also starting to foster a greater sense of inclusion among both residents and visitors when it comes on to placemaking. Finally, around talent development and attraction, I will note, as Mr. Herman mentioned earlier, this is really one of those pillars where the city plays more of a supporting role. There are other partners, other organizations that are more fit to actually lead in this sense, but we thought it was still important to be able to call out how the city can actually support these efforts because they are so important. So with that, I will jump into the first pillar here around business and entrepreneur vitality. And these are really around, one, business retention and expansion. That's heavily focused on the existing business community. So making sure that existing businesses have the support services that they need to not just continue their operations, but to really start to grow and expand. So one of those examples that we have listed in the plan is around establishing a business welcome program. So that would essentially help new businesses to be able to kind of understand the inner workings of the city, figure out if there are additional needs that they may have regarding training or more information. But it's basically a way to kind of support them as they locate in the city and start to get themselves set up. That second piece around entrepreneurial support, quite a lot of work has been done with this, with Cal Poly, and the idea here is really to continue to build on that growth, making sure that you have a stronger ecosystem with greater access to those resources, to education, and networks for entrepreneurs. So what that could look like is continued collaboration with the CIE, maybe working with the Chamber as well as REACH and other partners to start to conduct some familiarization tours with like venture capitalists, get them into the area, get them, familiar with all of what's going on around innovation in this area. Next, we talk about business preparedness and sustainability. So kind of tying back to that, that sustainable economic development guiding principle here. This is more so related to ensuring that the city has some of those disaster preparedness measures in mind, making sure that the business community is able to respond to a lot of those economic disruptions before they actually happen, so that when they do, they're better able to recover following any disaster or disruption. Next, around small business development. So that's really providing those support services to the small business community. And there's really an opportunity here for the city to even take information, let's say from business licenses, kind of looking at some of that demographic data, seeing where maybe some organizations, maybe within minority populations, are maybe struggling in a particular area, starting to take some of that information and then using that to determine what kind of additional services are needed to serve those businesses. And finally here within this pillar is around that business support infrastructure. So really just making sure that efforts are continued to develop and grow the existing business support structure and tools. Around placemaking and promotion, so much work has been done around that quality of place. I think there are so many great efforts that have been made within tourism. We think that there are quite a bit of opportunities for the city to start to leverage a lot of those efforts. One example around that quality of place promotion is around really starting to focus in on some of the neighborhoods, so outside of the downtown, really highlighting some of those unique features, unique aspects of like culture, and building out like a wider, broader, more diverse kind of identity for the city. Also creating that welcoming environment, so making sure that SLO is seen as a place that's inclusive and friendly for not just residents, but also for people who work here, people who visit here. And what that could look like is being able to use storytelling to your advantage. So making sure that people who are telling stories about SLO, so whether it's about maybe a business they opened or their just personal experiences with different events here, just making sure all these people look different and representative of like what is actually going on within the city. You can really start to take folks and use them to create that story that you would like to tell externally. Also around, let's see, downtown vitality. So there has been quite a bit of focus around the downtown. So we are recommending that that focus really does continue. And one particular recommendation is really around the development of a conference facility. We know that there have been quite a bit of discussion, studies done around that, and we're recommending that the city does restart those discussions and really start to think about and look at what that could possibly be, and what that would possibly look like in terms of funding, whether that be private funding, public-private funding, but really starting those discussions again. And lastly, just focusing on inclusive neighborhood planning, working with the community development department to make sure that those planning efforts benefits both residents and also starts to encourage both housing production and economic activity. The last pillar around talent development and attraction, the first piece here around system development really focuses in on those moderate income jobs. Lee talked a bit about head of household jobs in the beginning of his presentation, and we've essentially, within this plan, moved away from that terminology and started to align some of those measures with things that the city is currently using in terms of their housing standards. And one example within that particular strategy is really starting to work with the chamber to locate business owners that are willing and able to talk about the benefits of offering those higher quality, better paying jobs that have benefits, having them just share their experiences in terms of how that has helped their productivity. And it tends to be a lot more impactful when you have your peers, talking to you about the benefits of things rather than being told by others, right? So outside of that, looking at that employer and employee integration, I know there are quite a bit of some efforts with the chamber on this in terms of making sure that new employers and employees are acclimated to the community. So we definitely recommend that that is continued, and potentially even look to those co-working spaces to see if there's some opportunities to further integrate remote workers, new workers into the community as well. And lastly, around talent attraction and retention, just making sure that there's continued focus on positioning the city as a place to not just visit, but to actually stay and to live. And finally, working with those education partners to start to create and grow those pathways that will create those higher paid, moderate income plus jobs that we're referring to. So that is it for the pillars. In terms of what we have coming up next, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with what we call the implementation matrix, we really look at this as a bit of an ever-evolving kind of tool. So we create the plan and we give you all these strategies, and that's a very static document. But the implementation matrix is meant to be something that can evolve and change over time as needed. So if we kind of wrote a particular strategy with our current knowledge and 6 months down the line, something really changes, you're able to adapt and change those strategies if you're needed within that implementation matrix. So the matrix really helps you to track the individual strategies, the lead organization, more times than not, this will be the city in this case, potential supporting partners as well, as well as a timeline and status. So that matrix will be kind of monitored and updated by the Economic Development and Tourism Program, and they will update that matrix at least quarterly and make sure that it's posted to the city's website as well. And on an annual basis, the Economic Development and Tourism Program will prepare a memo to council in the spring of each year. So with that, that concludes my part. So I'm going to turn it over to Lee. So we could start the Q&A.
Yeah, that's basically the presentation and the plan, and we'll turn it over to you from here.
Well, the Gantt chart is after my own heart. Implementation matrix, I love it so much. But thank you for a fabulous presentation, and I appreciated the time before with both of you on the survey time period, and really appreciate the presentation. I'll start with Councilmember Shoresman.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, and thank you for the 221 back in May. That was really useful and kind of gave us a preview, as intended, of what you were going to talk about today. I just really have one question. I asked a couple of questions in advance, and thank you to staff for the answers to those in the agenda correspondence. But just a little bit of clarification on one of those questions about the use of the below market rate housing standards as a sort of a benchmark for. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding again the use of that. Am I understanding correctly that the idea behind using that table is to get an idea of what would be considered a medium, a moderate income pay for people, for entities we're trying to recruit, employers that would pay at a moderate income level or more based on that standard in the housing guidelines?
Yes. So in the original Economic Development Strategic Plan in 2012, we basically had to make it up. There was nothing really that anybody said that what's a quality job. So the team then made up the head of household job definition and applied it to San Luis Obispo. And as we got into this update, it was from like day one. Everyone across the board. Concept of having a standardized look at what's a quality job makes sense. Head of household job does not. There is no such thing in any community now. There's so many different household shapes and types and people that you can't use that. So we worked with TIP to look for a substitute, and there is a lot of interesting ideas out there from MIT and other places that meet a lot of the criteria. They're updated regularly. They meet the things we need to do to define that. And they also lined up very well with our moderate income standards that we also update. The challenge was on some of the areas, they weren't exact. And our community tends to be pretty literal. And so when we talked with community development, we decided it was probably best to use a standard that we already have. That is a note for a moderate income job would work when you add in plus the plus of the other factors. And so we could keep that standard. We have that. And it helps us to target industries who primarily employ people that meet that criteria or higher. So it's a way to do that and benchmark it and have a reference point. And it's more inclusive than what we used in the past. And it's also more closely tied to what we already use in the city and community development. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. So just to use an example, so in other words, your hope is to try and encourage jobs that for a single person would make $64,000 or more, rather than having this nebulous head of household.
Yes, and preferably have the 4 other criteria as well.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Councilmember Pease.
Great. Thank you so much for all of this. And there's just so many great things going on in here that I'll maybe mention a few during deliberation, but I have a couple of questions. The first is, and we did talk about this on 221, that kind of mushing up of sustainability. And I, appreciate kind of a little more explanation. We're trying to do double meeting, and I'm feeling like I would like clarity. And when we get to, maybe there's even just some tiny little language shifts that might bring that for me. But I'm wondering, I know that there's some really great work programs in here, and I'm just wondering if we could hear a little bit more about that. Environmental sustainability isn't kind of named in here. There's a little, maybe in some places, but kind of at that bigger level. I know that Chris Reed was a part of the team and has brought a lot to that. And so maybe the team can share a little bit more about what this brings in terms of that sustainability, like we think of our Office of Sustainability Environmental, understanding that economic sustainability also has an important role in terms of being, able to endure over time. But just wanting to hear more about what this unlocks for those more environmental sustainability goals.
Mayor Stewart, Councilmember Peace, absolutely. I think my good friend, Mr. Reed, has been very involved in the project. He stayed here tonight to be able to share his thoughts with you, so I'd be doing him a disservice if I didn't let him go first.
Awesome, thank you.
Well, thank you, Councilmember, for the question, and good evening, Mayor and Council. From a process perspective, the Office of Sustainability and Natural Resources has been closely involved in this project from its onset and has worked really hard to support our economic development colleagues in integrating all of the climate action commitments we've made through our climate action plans, our lead by example plans, and all the other work we've done. And ultimately, really believe that that has made its way into here in a really meaningful and significant way. And we're supportive of how language is used in here and how the tasks ultimately end up. I think there's a lot of conversations that we can have about sustainability. As a sustainability professional, I've probably spent years arguing about the nuances of definition and what sustainability means. Ultimately, in the Office of Sustainability and Natural Resources, we take a really big picture on what sustainability means. It's not just greenhouse gas emissions, it's not just natural resources, but really the comprehensive system across the city, being able to function and thrive, in our case, in a rapidly changing climate, but against a whole bunch of different potential impacts. I would point to, it's page 6 of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, where I think it really clearly articulates the nexus between economic development and the climate and sustainability work that the city broadly does. And it sort of points to 3 facets where that nexus happens. And so one, it's around the opportunity to capitalize on the economic development potential of the clean energy transition. We're talking about nationally, trillions of dollars, statewide, hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decades in this transition. So it's being able to grow companies that can take advantage of that. 2 is the need to mitigate the shocks and disruptions brought by a changing climate on the economic system. We saw just this year the impacts that flooding have on our ability to function as a community. And then finally, as a city and as businesses, as organizations work to reduce their own emissions, we have an opportunity to support those businesses and our own organization through that journey. And you see, when you look at the actions, so we saw a bit about the strategies, but the specific actions we're committed to, in every single pillar, there are actions that lead back to those 3 items where that nexus occurs. And I won't read through all of them, but there's a couple of really nice examples I want to call attention to. Right in the first pillar, which is again focused on business and entrepreneur vitality, we have some pretty simple actions related to supporting our Slow and Green Business Network, but also some really big actions around helping entrepreneurs, innovators, and new businesses participate in the clean energy transition, focusing on how we can build capacity for folks to engage in that space where all this economic opportunity is going to occur. We talk about resilience and focusing on helping businesses have the capacity to withstand the economic shocks that are brought on by the impacts of climate change. And we also talk about small business development, encouraging development in these specific sectors where there's so much economic opportunity. Pillar 2 also is full of sustainability commitments. It's the one that doesn't say green or sustainability or climate as much, but when you think about a compact urban form, you think about the ability to walk, bike, and bus through our community, then you think about our biggest emission sector being transportation. It really is a critical ally in how we're a critical resource in implementing these actions will be highly supportive of how we implement our climate action plan. And then finally, on the talent development and attraction pillar, we see throughout here as well commitments in alignment with climate action plan, and particularly in 341, which is around the creation of a talent pipeline for green jobs and supporting businesses. If you've read the national media, you know there's a shortage of electricians and folks in the trades to complete all the work they're going to do. And all those works happen to be high quality jobs that can only be done with local and regional community members. So across the plan, that commitment and alignment with our climate work is really clear. And answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel just being able to kind of gather all that in terms of an intent and then a plan of action. I just really appreciate your taking the time to be here and lift up those pieces. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you want to respond, Lee? Okay.
And then I have a second question is about that kind of talent attraction piece. So from my perspective, people are always wanting to move here, right? That's not usually an issue in terms of attracting people. And so that's what I want to hear about, right? So if I'm thinking, gosh, the challenge is that is affordability, right? Even the folks who want to move here, we can't, they're challenged by affordability. So I guess what I'm checking in on, all those pieces that talk about affordability and transportation, some of those macro issues like childcare, et cetera, that would be able to support a workforce. But what is it that you're hearing that says we need to go out and attract talent?
Councilmember Peace, employers told us during the outreach that they can find good people that want to come here, but convincing them that it's worth it to take the risk can be challenging. So hearing the stories of people who have made the leap, like many of us have, to come here and find a way to make it work, hearing those stories is important. Having the ammunition to talk about the opportunities that exist once you get here, all of that kind of supporting information to things like we do with the SOAR program with the chamber for other significant people who come with the person to help find them jobs. That support network and storytelling and things like that can help to make the difference when people are choosing between two high-cost communities, and they may not want to come to this one because it may not feel inclusive enough from what they've heard, or it may not have enough other opportunities. Say, if they decide to change jobs in 3 or 4 years, they don't want to have to move again. So there's a lot to that that's just outside the dollars and cents that we can use Molly's expertise in storytelling and tourism to help make that better for our employers, to get those people to, a lot of people are choosing here or someplace that's just expensive, just as expensive. And if we can help that choice, those kind of things, help them understand what you get here. You don't need a 4,000 square foot house because you are never in your house. You're outside all of the time. So there's a lot more we can do than just that, there's the emotional side and those kind of things that we can have an impact on.
That's super helpful. And so then my little follow-up is kind of the nagging, like if those folks are coming in, is it going to be even more competition for the limited housing stock? We're trying to do that balance of supporting the housing community and still there's an existing employee base that is having to commute. And now if we're talking about more folks coming in for the housing that we're just really working to provide.
So Mayor Stewart, Councilmember Peace, I know the struggle on the definitions between on sustainability, right? So I go back to my friend, the Oxford Dictionary, and the 2 quotes in Oxford Dictionary are the sustainability of economic growth and the pursuit of global environmental sustainability. So the piece you're talking about is the system sustainability. We lose people. We have major employers that go bankrupt or move or change their workforce. So there are people also leaving here every day. Mm-hmm. And that replacement has to happen a lot of ways. It has to happen from people who are commuting, getting them here, or people who are moving from elsewhere to here. We are in a very complex environment, and you basically have to be spinning 20 plates at the same time and keeping them all spinning. Every once in a while adding a new plate, keeping them spinning. So it's a system in a lot of ways, and we're such a small town with so much diversity in a lot of ways as far as economic background, things like that. You just kind of have to keep levering all these things a little bit because there's no one solution to all of it, if that makes sense.
Yes, those are great answers to really kind of hard problems to balance. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you all so much for the presentation and for answering all of my questions during agenda review today. Just something caught my ear as you were doing the presentation earlier about was it strategic approach to commercial development? And I was wondering if you could maybe articulate what some of the strategies are that fell under that strategic approach, and maybe get into the nuances of why you think we need a strategic approach to commercial development.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
Councilmember Francis, so there is a limited amount of commercial space that's available. And anytime we see a limited amount, we know those are job centers, right? And so whenever we see a limited amount of real estate, we know, okay, so we have to be very cautious with the decisions that we get made. We also know there are a lot of pressures for all kinds of other uses that take place in the city. So we always try to encourage communities that have or find themselves in that set of circumstances to just be very thoughtful in terms of decisions that they make, because you want to preserve as much of those job creating opportunities as you possibly can. I think that's the kind of the short answer.
And to get into a slightly longer answer, what are some of the strategies that you're recommending that we focus on?
Sure. There's certainly, you can decide that the areas of commercial and industrial use you have now should stay in those, and not be used for additional, other uses. And so there's some preserving of commercial space that I think is important. There's also flexibility that should take place with some of the commercial use that goes on. I certainly know that the folks in downtown have done that for quite some time, and being adaptive and being flexible certainly with the retail users. That's a big priority. Working hand in glove with the real estate community to understand kind of what the dynamic is and what's happening, what trends they're starting to see, also helps inform all of those things. So this is just some of the strategies that we think about. One of the hallmark strategies that we put in the plan is really to formalize the business retention and expansion program within the city. You all know, after spending any time with Lee, he knows everyone and everything that takes place across the city. But having a formal program that actually captures information and going out and knocking on as many doors and talking and listening and learning from those businesses, and they can also share with you kind of what they're seeing or what their plans are in terms of expanding or rental rates or any of those, and that to us is a core strategy that's absolutely yields so much value across every plan or every strategy that's in this plan.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
Okay. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, in the past, there's been a lot of focus and energy on the manufacturing segment. Mostly people who manufacture drones or parts of wheels for the Mars rover or all this stuff that's going on. That's really amazing. And I just wondered if you could respond to what you're recommending for manufacturing. I don't know if that's the same thing as industrialization, but I think it's really important, especially for job creation, but also the kind of mentorship and, really growing the workforce from the very talented people we have here, many of whom are underemployed. Really, they're working in Starbucks, but they've got a master's degree, this kind of thing.
So I think I can speak to that one. It's really, we started this a long time ago, looking at how the cost of land here is very expensive. And if you're not doing specialized manufacturing that's adding value and creating real value for your customers, you're not going to be able to afford to do business here. And that is a holistic system. We had 1 or 2 people in 2012. Now we have 50 or 60 who are in those types of businesses. And those people are working, there's people working there, and they are learning things, and then they're going to start a new business with the blessing of the former employer, maybe not. But where we've really started to, over the last few years, to make progress is filling that pipeline of talent, like with Slow Partners. They're doing specialized manufacturing cohorts of people who enter the program, they get trained in the evenings, they work in the facilities during the daytime. The company I used to work at, we hired 70% of one of their entire classes and started them right away. So that connection, like we're doing with the airline mechanics out at ACI Jets and Cuesta College, those kind of connections from K through 12 to Cuesta and Cal Poly and Slow Partners and other people to start filling those needs for these types of businesses that are starting and staying here is how this kind of all links together, from supporting the businesses to the talent development and working with partners. It's one, I think, of our successful things we've done. There's a lot of people on the software side that have spun out of MindBody or Hathaway or somebody else. So the more of those kind of clusters you can get, you start to share that knowledge. And then if you can track it back to the talent pipeline to keep the people here who want to stay here and give them that opportunity, then you're really starting to build a system that works. If that answers the question, I hope so.
Yeah, I guess. So I agree in terms of the status quo. And looking forward, what kind of strategic initiatives are being imagined in that regard?
It's broadening the partnerships that we have and the length of that span that we're working. So previously, let's say we work with the CIE only. It's backing that further back into on-campus life at Cal Poly or through San Luis Coastal that way, or with the Workforce Development Board at a higher level. Between REACH and now what we're doing with this strategic plan, we're trying to make that span longer and deeper and wider than we have in the past. As kind of I mentioned before, getting plate spinning. Once you have a plate spinning, it's much easier to keep it spinning. So then you can add more people to that mix. 5 years ago, 8 years ago, we never would have been able to do the Cuesta to ACI Jet. Never been able to do Slow Partners to Trust Automation. And so if you can, 5 years from now, if we're taking that from 6th grade, kids are getting a tour of Trust Automation to, daycare and childcare and those kind of things, it's making that broader, deeper, wider, if that makes sense.
Good. I just wanted to add as an aside that my oldest grandson is in that ACI Jet. He's training to be an aviation technician, and he's totally on fire. Gets to crawl around. He said he calls it Lego for grown-ups. Gets to crawl around on airplanes and take them apart and put them back together. Anyway, so it sounds to me from what you're saying is that just continue in the direction we're going, because it's successful.
I think Mr. Herman wanted to add to that.
Absolutely. I think if you want to look at the plan in particular on Pillar 3, talent development and attraction, and the last strategy that we have is around educational partnerships, I think that's where you see that formalized in the plan. So there's specific strategies that speak to facilitating introductions between workforce training providers and major employers, to build those relationships and identify areas of need, and then to work backwards, as Lee mentioned, in the pipeline piece of it through partners all the way from Cuesta and Cal Poly to San Luis Coastal to make sure that we're doing our part to make sure that those folks are there when the employers have the need for the employees.
I would just add one more thing, Vice Mayor Marks, that you may not have noticed the goldfish picture in this. That is kind of representing what we're talking about. That we're going from the small bowl to the bigger bowl. We're growing up. We're going to the next level in what we're doing with this plan, not only on sustainability and diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also on traditional economic development work that you used to combine it with a small city, but now we work with all these partners. I work with Paso and Atascadero and Grover Beach every day. And that was not something that happened in 2012 or 2013. So it's doing the same things, but in a much bigger way.
Thank you so much. And I could go on and on about from my HR experience around the people who we don't get to keep here and the people we're trying to attract and not get to actually have them solidify here because of so many reasons. And one of them is where I'm going is 3.4.2, continue to advocate for solutions around issues with childcare. And I just was thinking it would be better to have a stronger word than advocate. I can go, yay, please do it. I think we need something that actually is out there. I mean, I feel like childcare is similar to housing and homelessness. We can't build our way out of it. Well, at 4 people at a time with our childcare grants, which are awesome, and I'm so thrilled we did them, that's not going to do it either. I mean, the amount of people just myself that I am hiring in a small department of Cal Poly, we are losing people all the time due to childcare, and that is exponential in this community. And so I'm just wondering, is there a reason you didn't choose to have something more strong on that?
Mayor Stewart, no, I would be glad to use a stronger word. There is a role that we play, like from an advocacy perspective. Like one of the things, like if I had a longer term dream, it would be like a Cuesta promise, except for childcare. So it'd be all the kids before they go to school would be promised a preschool education. And the people who did the teaching would be promised that they could make a wage that could keep them here. And you would fund that through an endowment type of stuff, just like the promise was done. From where we sit in the economic development and tourism space, the best I can do, like hammer or pummel or something to get people to do it. But advocate seems like a more appropriate word. But I understand what you say. And the good news is about the matrix is we can change this every quarter. The timings, the wordings, all of those things as we go through the process, if it becomes a different way to be able to do something or something changes, then we can change this. And when things are done, we can look to add things between now and the next update to the plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Herman?
Sure. And can I just add one piece? So I think this is meant to be what you can expect out of the Economic Development and Tourism Program as it relates to childcare, but you have, of course, all the major city goal tasks related to the larger plays that we're trying to make to be able to create capacity within the community that will continue as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think the only other question I had was around the conference center. I remember a while back, maybe 2 years back, Grover Beach was the kind of the focus for our region for a conference center. It sounds more that you're kind of encouraging SLO to be that place. So I'm curious why or what was behind that.
Finally, I get to speak. Happy to take this one. So conference center, yes, anchoring back to the work that's been done quite a number of years ago, I want to say in 2017 or 18, Visit SLOCAL undertook a study that looked countywide at the locations that would be best suited to serve a conference center for a regional facility. A number of different locations throughout the county were identified, but really anchoring back to San Luis Obispo and the city of SLO being the right location, proximity to the airport, the amount of lodging facilities that we have available, the services and where they're based, all of those types of assessment needs we're taking a look at. Fast forward a little bit, we wanted to venture in and say, okay, so what would this look like if the city of SLO was able to say, okay, how could we take that project to the next level? We entered into that work, and in March of 2020, that project was about to wrap up. I think we all remember what happened in March of 2020. So we received that report back from the facility or from the consultants at that point in time. However, we knew there was so much uncertainty, especially in the conference market, that trying to forecast what that would look like coming out of the pandemic was not realistic at that point. So we paused that work at that point in time. We've now re-engaged with that consultant, and we'll be able to look at that work again to identify where in San Luis Obispo, if a conference center was feasible, where it could be located, as well as the funding mechanisms to get us there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah. Vice Mayor Marks? Oh.
Yeah, back to the conference center. I have to say my husband tried to organize an international Shakespeare conference and when he was a professor at Cal Poly, and couldn't do it because there wasn't enough space to actually do an international conference, so forget that. But in the past, people have talked about Caltrans District 5 moving out from the corner, I want to say, of Madonna and Higuera. And of course, they're still there, although they've purchased land by the Octagon Barn. But are you talking about a consultant that would be talking about physical locations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and in the original study, the secondary study that we did, the one that we were undergoing in March of 2020, one of the things that we did at that point in time was take a look at all areas of the city, really trying to understand what that looked like. We probably surveyed over 50 locations within the city that could potentially be viable locations. That was narrowed down to a smaller group of about 10 to 13 that we actually ran through the system to really kind of get a sense of what it would be. The Caltrans location was definitely a location we looked at, as well as locations elsewhere in our community, and even expanding current facilities that we have available right now. I think that there's interest in actually adding some potential other locations to look at. And so as we venture into this work now over the next quarter, as we get that started, we'll be looking at some more of those potential sites also. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It looks like all the questions have subsided. Is there any public comment, City Clerk?
Yes, there are. There are two, Jim Dantona and Bettina Swigger.
All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. First, I want to start by thanking the City of SLO for engaging in an economic development strategic plan. The business community is certainly appreciative that this is a focus for our city and that you spend time and resources to build a plan that sets out a path to create a healthy economy into the future. I especially want to thank Lee Johnson and Molly Kano for all their work and the consultants with the community to ensure that all the voices who wanted to share their thoughts on this plan were able to do so. I do want to comment on the lack of speakers that seem to be here this evening. I hope you don't take that as a statement of lack of interest. In fact, I believe the lack of speakers shows that staff and the consultants have listened to the feedback and drafted a solid strategic plan. Regarding the specifics of the plan, the City of SLO enjoys some tremendous assets that have provided the basis for a strong economic activity. Its beautiful natural location on California's Central Coast, a city organization that's prioritized support for our local business community, the quality of life and spirit of entrepreneurship that's been fostered and cultivated in the community driven by such programs as Cal Poly CIE. To maintain this realized success driven by the progress made over the past 10 years, the city is going to have to manage through potential issues facing its residents who make up the workforce for its economy. The number one issue facing our business community is finding a diverse, trained workforce due to the cost of living in our community. Most visible in our lack of housing of all types and the delayed infrastructure that is necessary to make that housing available. We appreciate that the plan and staff has recognized the major issue and in the report direct people to the identified major city goal of housing. We look forward to working with all of you to continue to find new ways and ideas to deliver that much needed housing and develop prioritized funding for infrastructure that will allow our community to flourish well into the future. We truly appreciate the actions identified in Pillar 1 of the action plan that prioritizes business and entrepreneur vitality. Those actions will help ensure that our local economy continues to thrive. As one shining example, seen earlier, the city has shown amazing proactive engagement to our business community through the financial support and programs like Buy Local and Eat Local Bonus. We support your recognition and continued support of Pillar 2 because it is the heart of our economy and our love of this wonderful place. As I mentioned in the earlier statements, the city enjoys some tremendous natural assets that make this a fabulous place to enjoy. It is through the continued great work of city staff, our TBID, and the PCC, we continue to make SLO a wonderful place to work, live, and play. Finally, we are thankful that the talent development and attraction is a goal of this strategic plan. As I mentioned earlier, it is the greatest challenge facing your business community. And we look forward to helping ensure that we turn this challenge into an opportunity with you. We value the partnership that we have developed in furtherance of sustaining our economy. The Chamber, identified as a partner in many of the deliverables, will gladly offer our assistance in support of all these actions and goals that will help us meet the challenge and take advantage of the opportunities that will present themselves in the coming years. We look forward to enacting this new update to the city's economic development strategic plan that will be the guiding light for our continued long-term economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. My name is Bettina Swigger. I'm the CEO of Downtown SLO and also a downtown resident. We are the city's collaborative nonprofit partner in economic vitality for downtown. And on behalf of our board of directors, our staff, and the hundreds of businesses that make up our membership, I want to thank the council and the staff for the really meaningful work on developing this economic plan. In particular, I want to thank Lee Johnson and Molly Kano and the consultants for such a wonderful process. As Jim said, there really have been opportunities to speak and be heard every step of the way. Because we were offered so many opportunities along the way to provide feedback, I actually don't have any concrete additions to offer other than our enthusiastic support. And at Downtown SLO, we work every day with an emphasis to embody this plan, especially on placemaking and promotion, on retaining and strengthening existing businesses. And we know that the focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion is critical for our economic success. And it's closely linked to the support of businesses and entrepreneurs. There's been a lot of focus in the presentation on kind of big macroeconomic things and large industry segments, but I wanted to just zoom in a little bit on some of the small businesses because there is a saying in SLO that all business is small business. And since the Thursday Night Farmers Market is celebrating its 40th anniversary in 2023, I wanted to take a moment to point out how this beloved tradition on Higuera is expanded and has been working as an incubator for entrepreneurs and is really supporting the pillars of this plan already. When we relaunched the market after the pandemic, we dramatically restructured the way that our applications are processed and we eliminated unnecessary barriers to participation. We're currently operating at capacity and we have a really robust and considerable wait list. We have more than 120 vendors each week. And these businesses include homegrown products, passion projects, all produced by hardworking people who are just trying to make a living and stay here in this wonderful community. The point of all this is to say that when you open things up and you make it easier for people to do businesses, everybody benefits. And the farmers market serves as a microcosm of the overall marketplace. And so I believe that it really shows how embracing innovative, inclusive ways of doing business results in a stronger community. I really believe that this plan is designed to move the economic development of the whole city forward in a similar fashion, and we're really looking forward to working as a partner to implement this plan. We encourage you to adopt it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, I think first and foremost, I know we've already all said thank you, but truly, thank you. This has been a really thorough plan, and I think it really gives a great framework and roadmap to where we can go going forward. While I think there's certain things that I would love to dig into more, I know that, thank you, Mr. Harmon, it is true, they're in our work plan already, but I just really want to see it. And I also appreciated the head of household job. I've heard more called the primary job, and I appreciate it even more being the moderate income job because there are so many ways that households are shaped. I know that there were a lot of comments around SLO is special, keep it special, and I really appreciate how you've also changed that as the quality of place, because that is really what we're talking about. We love the community where we live, and inclusion is so important when we're talking about the quality of place. So I just really appreciated that. And then I also just really appreciated the idea around, I kind of think of it as the newcomers group, you know, when someone moves into a new area with the business. I think that that is something that is so key. I feel like if you don't know how to get around San Luis Obispo, I mean, it really is a word of mouth place. And that is hard when you don't know who the people are and how to even get in. So I appreciate trying to operationalize that aspect because that is something that we don't necessarily do well. Yeah. So I also thought that just highlighting the business preparedness aspect, you know, I really hadn't thought about putting that in this development plan, but seeing how the city and the chamber and the downtown association, how do we put our floodgates on? I think that was a really key thing for many people in January, and seeing that even in here is so important. So, and then lastly, I'll say it again, the implementation matrix I think is great. It's wonderful for tracking, it's wonderful for accountability, and it's just really, you know, clear and transparent. And then I heard it from our public speakers. I heard it from this whole process is the community engagement has been really great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is what I think creates a plan that we can keep going forward. So sorry to jump in first. Usually I try to let you all go in first, but I just was so excited about this. So Councilmember Shoresman.
No, you said some of the things that I was going to say, so now I get to be shorter. I do appreciate, again, great work. We did receive some other emails to those who spoke tonight, so you weren't the only ones, and they praised the amount of engagement too. So maybe you're right that's why there aren't very many speakers here tonight, because there was a lot of engagement and opportunities to participate. I love, there's a lot of great stuff in this report, in this plan. I like the frequency of updates that you all have built into the process here, with the quarterly updates on the website and the memo back to us, and the in the spring, and then the presentation in the fall. It's a really good way for us to kind of keep track of how things are happening, and appreciate that opportunity. I think your key findings were right on target in pretty much every way. You said a lot of the things that we all kind of know anecdotally, but it was great for you to come and do this pretty objective process and kind of confirm a lot of the things that we know already, or that we've felt like we knew already. Echo the mayor's comments about business preparedness. With my background in emergency preparedness and seeing again how the storms went, it's good to see that as an ongoing thread that we all need to continue to think about. And usually those kinds of things are out of sight, out of mind when nothing happens for a while, right? But that's when you really need to do the preparedness the most. I think if there was one place that I would want to see a little bit more emphasis is in our healthcare sector. I know this plan doesn't really talk sector by sector too terribly much. We talk about small businesses. Councilmember Pease and Mr. Reed brought up the focus areas on sustainability, but we know, I hear it all the time in my day-to-day role, we know that we have a lack of healthcare providers, and we know from your table here on page 136, I think it's table 11, that registered nurses are pretty high waged, above moderate income wages, and we need a lot more of them, as well as other types of healthcare providers in our area. And a lot of times we have to go out of the area, which can be a huge economic burden for a lot of people in order to get specialty care and sometimes even primary care. And I think that's a place that we really have some room to grow. So thank you again for the great report, and look forward to supporting it.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
There we are. I appreciate you answering all of our questions this evening, and just to say again that it seemed like there was ample evidence from all of our speakers that this was a truly collaborative process, which is just an exciting thing to have come in front of us. I love to see that this plan has evolved to reflect the values and the needs of our community, and really loved some of the language choices throughout. You could tell that they were really thoughtful and deliberate. And I also really enjoyed seeing how much focus there was on outreach and relationship building and creating a sustainable way of doing that, so that we're maintaining those relationships. It's not just the one touch, but it's actually developing those relationships for the long term. As a teacher, seeing all of the city emphasis on kind of that K to workforce training and support. Of course, I want to make sure that we're agendizing Lee's plan to get the childcare promise in there. I think that should be our next meeting here. Sorry, Lee, put you on the spot. That will make a real difference. And of course, comments from the public about our lack of affordable housing. These are things that, of course, the plan is addressing, and we as a city are trying to address. But all in all, I'm really excited about the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. I appreciate the thoughts and comments of those who've already spoken, so I won't repeat those. I do really appreciate the there's some comments in here that that as a community, we cannot reach our economic potential without being inclusive, right? And welcoming. So it's in our collective best interest, right? So I appreciate that comes through in this document. And in terms of the thoughtful conversation about sustainability and the environment and climate action, and just, I mean, it's so all-inclusive. I think there was some years ago this concept of a Green New Deal as a way to kind of drive some of that forward. Unfortunately, there's also potential for that kind of language to be politicized. And it also maybe oversimplifies in some ways what is really going on. So I had some some potential shifts in wording, and in the end, I think we leave the document. I think it was really thoughtfully done. Obviously, a whole lot of feedback into it, and we hear that within those steps, those action plans, I think all those goals for integration and sustainability at kind of that triple bottom line level is within the document itself. So I look forward to supporting it. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Vice Mayor Marks?
Thank you. Well, everyone's stolen my line, so I do want to just say that I have to share what Councilmember Shoresman, the first time I read this, which I guess was back in May, or whenever we had the 221s, I went, well, I know that. Well, we know that. Well, everybody knows that. And then at a certain point, I realized that the audience for this document is not just the people who are here already, but people who might be considering locating to the area, or people who have been here for a while but really are feeling kind of like they're not quite sure this is where they should stay. So I think it's rhetorically speaking, it's a broader audience than just us chickens who, yeah, well, we know that. But anyway, I think it was very well done in that way. And I also want to comment that for years, in decades past, the environmentalists and the business community were at each other's throats. And at a certain point, I don't know exactly when the shift happened, but at a certain point, I think the environmentalists realized that there is no value to poverty and economic downfall. And I think the business people at a certain point said, well, wait a minute, hey, there's a reason that we really need to have wonderful quality of life and a strong environment. A lot of it had to do with the acquisition of open space was controversial, believe it or not. So anyway, where these two kind of circles of interest overlap, that's kind of the sweet spot. And I think this document does hit it all, and appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I think at this point, we're ready to move forward. Councilmember Shoresman?
I'm ready to move approval of the strategic plan.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Francis?
I will second.
Wonderful, can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll be back to talk about the Committee to Review Elections, Campaign Regulations, and or cancel compensation. All right, we'll come back to a meeting. Our last topic is the considering creating a committee to review elections, campaign regulations, and or council compensation. And I believe City Clerk Teresa Parrington and Deputy City Manager Greg Herman will present the report.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. We're still happy to be here. So we're seeking direction from council on items related to both election campaign regulations and council compensation. And if we can go to the recommendation slide, the way that we're going to get that direction is by asking you lots of questions. So questions. First question, should the maximum allowable contribution in city regulations be lowered to $250 to align with Senate Bill 1439? And just to note that that can be accomplished either through the creation of an election regulation committee or through direction to staff to return with an ordinance to make that change in the municipal code. And secondarily, whether or not the council is interested in making compensation changes for the city council and advisory body members, which can be accomplished also in a couple of different ways, including forming a council compensation committee or leveraging a new tool that's available to make council compensation adjustments via a CPI increase. For more on all of that, and thank you to Teresa for putting all this information together, I will hand it over to her.
Okay, so Mayor and Council, we're going to do this in two sections because while both involve elections, they are two very different topics. So the first one is the elections campaign regulations. So Senate Bill 1439 became effective January 1, 2023, which broadens the scope of Section 84308 of the Political Reform Act. Basically, it prohibits local elected officials from taking part in licensing, permitting, or other entitlement proceedings involving a party or a participant who contributed more than $250 to the official within the 12 months prior to the proceeding. It also extends the period by which an official is prohibited from receiving contributions exceeding $250 from a party or participant in a proceeding from 3 months to 12 months after a final decision. So the two things in this that really you have to think about is the party and the participant. So the party is an actual developer or property owner. A participant is a representative of one of those or a neighboring person or different things like that. And that only comes into play with when you get the money and how you get the money. It's a really complicated regulation, but the other good thing to know about this is even if you did take the contribution, you do have an opportunity to cure. The length of time that you have it to cure and is determined by whether it was done prior to or after the decision, and the difference is 30 days if it was prior to, and it's only 14 days if it was after. So it just made your campaign regulations, campaign contribution regulations a little bit harder. So how it relates to us or this city is the last time our campaign contribution regulations were reviewed was in 2013. So at that time, it was raised from $250 to $300. It has not been looked at again since then. It's been that way. So this came about because at the council retreat, council asked us to bring an item forward so that you could talk about it to discuss whether or not it made sense to lower it or not. So at that meeting, we were pretty definitive that you would have to do a committee. However, after the meeting, we went back and actually read the regulations all over again. And so it is a may, it's not a must or a shall. So that's where you have the latitude to make the decision. So now I don't know if you want to, it's easier to talk about that one and move forward, or if you want to just go through the rest of this because campaign council compensation is a little more nuanced and complicated. So
I'd love to split them up if that's okay with everyone, because I feel like it's really two different issues, even though it comes under the same umbrella. Does anyone have initial questions for the city clerk and/or Mr. Herman? No. Okay. Any public comment on just the $300 comment? Okay. Vice Mayor Marks.
All right, we're in deliberation now, right? I think it's a great idea to reduce it to $250. The nightmare of having to return a contribution that was over that amount, or it was $300, so I have to send back $50. I think it's really, it will make everybody's life easier, and you know, I'm just trying to imagine trying to convince somebody to be my campaign treasurer if I did run again, and with it still being $300. It would be a nightmare. I think actually what it would mean in terms of campaigning, perhaps we'd have less, a little bit less in the kitty to spend, but everyone across the board, to be fair, everyone would also have the same amount. So I just would like to move that we do the simplest way forward.
Hold on, we have all of us
To
to,
lower.
before you go moving anything, we all have a few more things to talk about.
Yeah, well, go ahead. No,
Okay.
I mean, when the time comes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Pease.
That's my leaning as well, is to just give direction to come back with an ordinance for the 250. I don't feel quite as critical about, or that it's as essential as I did when I first heard about it, because somebody could make a choice individually, right? So if I were running again, which I'm not, because I have term limits, so I get to be out of this, what the actual implications would be, but I could make a personal decision that I'm not going to collect anything more than $250. And so as far as I know, then that would keep me from having to have these consequences. Personally, I think it would be more straightforward, cleaner if it's just $250 across the board. It's not that much financial difference. So that's my leaning.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this. I feel like our contribution limit is so low already that in one sense, it doesn't matter to lower it another $50. In another sense, I participated in a webinar on this topic last week, and there are still so many details and intricacies trying to be figured out about this that I wonder if we shouldn't wait and hear what people say a little bit more, see whether there's a little bit more legal analysis on this before we make a really quick decision about it. And maybe have a committee look at it, but I don't even really know that a committee is really a committee of lay people, not, no offense to anybody who would sit on a committee and consider this. I'm sure they would look at all the details very closely, but there's a lot of legal interpretation happening around this. And I don't feel the need to make a quick decision unless we have some sort of deadline that we need to do it soon before our next election or something. Otherwise, I'd like to kind of just watch this a little bit more.
Yeah, I originally was thinking immediately, oh, everyone, let's go 250, let's make life easy. After reading your report and having some more conversations around with different people from different cities, I don't have that same feeling anymore. You know, I said today, or I don't know, one day recently, you know, if my mom wants to give me $300, I am not going to ever vote on anything she gives me. And my point being that it is so hard to raise enough funds to be able to run for office as is, unless you can lend yourself a lot of money and you have money that you can lend and forgive, good for them. But if you financially don't have a lot, it's really hard to run. And I just think, why limit our future candidates to anything more? Because even those just $50, that $50 adds up. So when in theory, you're asking every friend and colleague you've ever had in your life, some of them are never going to come in front of you as a city member or as a applicant, or what am I trying to say? A agenda item. The other thing about that is the logistics of it will be difficult. And I hear what you're saying. I mean, the nightmare of it, I can't imagine. But my thought was similarly, Councilmember Pease, is that there'll be certain industries that if it were me, I would not accept the $300 from. I would only accept $250 because we know they're going to come in front of us. So I think that it should be really up to the candidate to be able to make that decision for themselves. So that's my thought on it. Vice Mayor Marks?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of legal questions and ambiguities and craziness. So we can always move it back to $300 or even another council if there's more clarity in the future. But right now, one of the things that would bother me is that you might not even know who's a participant or who's getting a permit at the community development counter to get an ADU or something that we'd have to vote on. And how do we know? I mean, you get, at least in my experience in campaigns, I've done a lot of them, I get a lot of small donations and then a certain number of larger ones, but I may not even know the person, and I don't know what they're doing if they don't actually come before our city council. How do we know? Could you put that slide back about what you're talking about?
And City Clerk, did you want to expand? Because I remember you shared with me earlier, I had the same question, and the participant that's that we'd have to vote on also has to tell us.
Right, that they should be notifying you if they're going to have to, but also there's the difference between you actually have to know that you received it. And I mean, in our city, and it's smaller and there's a little bit, but you have to also think that this is also going out to all the cities, and a lot of the cities, the candidates don't know who's getting
Well,
so there's
yeah.
this need for the participant to also inform you or inform at the dais. And at that time, if it were to happen at the dais, then you could vote on it, but you have 30 days to return the money. And it's either the difference or the total, whichever you feel is the right thing to do. It's not clearly defined in the law that it has to be all of it or the $50 in our instance. So one of the nuances to this, like I said, it's a pretty complicated thing. And I sat in on the same webinar, and there is still a legal challenge on this also that has not been decided. A court case, I can't remember now what it is, which it's a business entity, on the legality of even doing it this way and having this law in place. And so, there are a lot of different little nuances to it. And, the company that put on the webinar actually even said, there are a host of ways you could do this, but it seems like it's a little too soon to jump at anything right now, but it is entirely up to the individual city.
Yeah, I just, I could just see this really, I mean, FPPC has already given us all fits one way or another, frankly. I could really see this ending up in a situation where so many people would have to recuse themselves from a hearing that we couldn't even make a decision. Or a straw vote, or, no, it's just, to me, I would rather go for the simplicity. And if you talk about the overall cost of running campaigns, I certainly agree. It's way too expensive, but also in terms of fundraising for a campaign, you could say we had to lower the dollar amount, the maximum, because of this new law, and try to get more people to give you $250. I don't know. I just, I don't know. I would just as soon go ahead and lower it. I have to say, in terms of the timing, it will be, when will people start thinking about campaigning? Probably in the new year, probably in January. Some people could even start earlier. There might be people, I don't know, has anybody expressed interest at this point? It's usually later in the year.
In the 6 years that I've been doing this, the soonest I've seen anything is usually April.
April, okay. Right, and so, yeah. I mean, I guess we could postpone this, if we wanted to postpone, table this thing for a while, and then maybe in January or February, look at it again. And but I just foresee it being a real mess.
Councilmember Francis?
Question. If we don't reduce the amount to 250, are we looking at an exceptional addition to the workload of the city clerk's office? Do we anticipate any sort of blowback to your workload? Or it's all going to just fall on the individuals dealing with that?
All falling on the individuals dealing with it. There's nothing in the law that says I have to track it. So it's all tracked by you. The only time I have to look at your campaign finances is during the election.
And if a violation is brought up, though, then does that then have a ripple effect to your office?
No, it gets reported to the FPPC.
Okay. And it's sounding like there might be some interest in potentially tabling this until we hear a little bit more from legal actions that might be working their way through the court. Is that a motion that anybody else might be willing
would
to get on
be
board with?
Comfortable with tabling it till like January, February, whatever seems most logical. I assume that the city clerk and city attorney and staff will be kind of just keeping their eye out on it, of course, in case something new. And I'm pretty sure the League of Cities will probably share some information too if something changes. Councilmember Schwarzman?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of kind of waiting this out a little bit. And I know I intend to watch it myself too. I'm sure others do as well.
So was that a motion, Councilmember Francis?
It is. A motion to table this until February or March, depending on the status of legal actions working their way through the court.
Councilmember Francis? I'm sorry, Schwarzman?
I guess I would look to, in terms of the February, Marchish, I would look to
Say
the city
Q1.
clerk for more specificity on when she would like us to, when she thinks would be a good time to table it.
I would say probably February or March would probably be the best time.
That's okay,
Yeah,
range for you.
Yeah, actually February would probably be, because based on your direction on the next item, that would be about the same time if you decided to do a committee, we would be bringing it back. And even if you didn't, that's when we start looking at CPI and everything for you. So we have to come, the latest we can come back for compensation is May 1st. So we can come back sooner if that's the case.
Okay, then I guess I would ask Councilmember Francis if she's okay with that friendly amendment to make it February, and then I would second it.
Yes.
Do you want to just say Q3, so we don't have to pick a time? Just because I just picture fiscal year
Q3 sounds great.
Yeah, it's just, I don't want to pin people down for unnecessary reason. First and second.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Schwarzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you for the conversation and for the report. And back to you, City Clerk and Mr. Herman.
Okay. So now, council compensation. So Charter Section 410 says that the compensation for mayor and council shall be reviewed biannually in even number years. Recommended adjustments would be effective the following January for the next 2 years. So we're looking at a compensation increase that would go into effect January 2025, just so everybody is clear on that. Council policies and procedures outlines how that review should happen. However, then in April of 2022, council amended their policies and procedures to allow for a consumer price index increase in lieu of forming the compensation to review, a compensation committee to review the compensation. If you decide to appoint the council compensation committee, their review responsibility is the full council compensation package, which generally includes salaries, benefits, expenditure reimbursements, professional development, and any other compensation provided to the council. In 2014, council adopted resolution 10516, which included the compensation for the Planning Commission and the Architectural Review Commission in that review. The last full review of compensation was done in 2020. If you decide to elect a compensation committee, it is a 7-member committee appointed no later than the last meeting in January. Recommendations in a resolution are presented to the council, again, no later than the first meeting in May. That was where that date came from. And then if the recommendation is approved by the council, then they become effective again, January 2025. So the process to create this committee is council would provide me with nominations by August 22nd. We would bring those nominations to the full council September 5th. Then the committee would start meeting late September through January, depending on the number of meetings and the scope will drive, the scope of what you're having them review will drive the number of meetings we need to do, with the goal of having a recommendation back to council in February 2024. So we won't worry about the first part of it because we already did the campaign election regulations. But so what's before council right now is whether or not we want to form a full committee to review the compensation of the council and the advisory bodies, or you could defer the appointment of the committee and just do a CPI increase, or you can just leave it as it is. And so those are your options.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, I had a question from somebody about if we went the, I guess it's B, if we went the route of using a consumer price index increase, what consumer price index do we use?
I believe it's San Francisco.
City
LA,
manager.
all urban consumers, we use March year over year. And so,
Yeah, well, it's the first time we did it, and when we did it the last time, HR and I, we were kind of different. That's why I had to think.
And then secondly, the last time I think we addressed this conversation, I was pretty new to the council, and I don't remember if we did a CPI increase to just council, or did we do Planning Commission and Architectural Review Commission at that time as well?
I know the answer to that one. We did it to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any public comment? Thank you, thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward to deliberation. Vice Mayor Marks?
Yeah, well, I'm basically in favor of starting an election campaign compensation committee. I like the idea. I like what the Board of Supervisors have done, so I want to just throw out this possible idea. And what they've done is they've tied their pay to 50% of the bottom salary range of the California Superior Court judges. And so when the judges receive a raise, the supervisors get a salary bump too. And then Supervisor Don Ortiz-Legg was reported in the paper as saying, by tying this to the judges, we're really taking it out of the political theater. And I just feel that the work that this council does, especially the mayor, the number of hours that we all put in, I think we're really, in my opinion, undercompensated. And I would like to have the committee, among other things that they look at, also look at the idea of tying the mayor's pay to perhaps 50% of the supervisor's pay, which would be like 25% of the California Superior Court judges' pay, or it could be another percentage, maybe not 50%. If it were 50%, it would be $55,000 a year, which if you look at the income rates that were looked at for what's moderate. Okay, moderate, let's just say a family of 4, moderate would be $135,000 a year. $55,000 isn't even half of that. And I know that the mayor, from experience, but also from observing our present mayor, puts in a lot of time. And so it's not even, it's more than a half-time job in terms of the hours that are put in. And then the council members' pay could be 70% of the mayor's salary, which would be $38,500 a year, or it could be another percentage. I'm not interested in the percentages. I just thought, when I read that, I thought, well, that might be something that the compensation committee could look at as an alternative, would take it out of the political arena. And I think, frankly, and this probably will not apply to me personally, but I really think that it makes a lot of sense for council members to be better compensated.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, I really appreciate the process that I know that we didn't most recently elect to set up a compensation committee, but there was one set up in 2020, I believe. And I remember that committee did a very, very thorough assessment of compensation at that time, and they had a really solid, thorough methodology for coming up with the proposal that they made that was eventually accepted. And it was a pretty significant increase over what was previously paid. And I thought that the idea that we came up with this last time for just to kind of keep up was to do that consumer price index. And so I'm perfectly happy to just continue to do the CPI. I know this involves a lot of work for staff too, to put together the committee and staff the committee. And so if it were me, I would just say, let's just go with the CPI index and call it good for now, and maybe think more about assembling a committee when there's been a little bit more time since the previous committee did such a thorough assessment. But again, open to what others have to say.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you for both of those comments. I'm leaning more toward Councilmember Shorsman and approach, having been a part of that big effort, which I think appropriately did have a significant bump. For folks, I think our compensation for council members it was equated to a half-time job. So it's about $24,000 a year. So it certainly had, at a full-time 48,000, that wouldn't be a great amount of money to be able to live. It does come, so folks know, it does come with full benefits. We get health insurance. The mayor's proportional, kind of a 3/4 time job, which again, I think is super, as Councilmember Marks noted, is particularly challenging because whereas finding a half-time job and trying to, balance that out, but if you're already 3/4 time and trying to find enough to kind of fill that gap is challenging. So I think I would still lean toward the CPI at this time and then have a robust effort for next time. And I think the idea that does seem to be a trend, Santa Barbara does that as well, in terms of tying to a state office like that could be appropriate. I think we're also really well compensated compared to a whole lot of other cities. So I could see it going both ways. So I think but if folks want to do a compensation committee, I would be open, if others feel that, I'd be open to making that happen as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, this is challenging because, talking about our own potential future compensation, it makes the certain ick factor to discuss it. But, just zooming out and putting it into a historic context, the decisions around compensating this type of role really does open the door to more people being able to participate in being a part of local governance. And I think I'm leaning towards bringing in a council compensation committee and just looking at, is there a better way for us to evaluate how to compensate our local governance? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been struggling on this one because I think on one hand, the CPI was simple and clear and, not a lot of conversation has to happen, not a lot of staff time has to be taken in the committee, which would be nice to not have one more thing for the staff to do. And when I look at the bigger picture, I agree with you what you're saying. I feel like talking about our own salary compensation is very odd. But when I take myself out of it for a second, and I think who else can be in this role based on their finances, and then that or if you have childcare needs and you have to pay for childcare, or is it the professional development? Because if you get someone that is really excited and passionate, but has never been a leader before officially in any sort of capacity, they probably could use some training, and maybe it's our professional development that we're looking at. And yeah, so I'm not really sure as far as like what's the best thing, because I could really go either way as far as the compensation committee and the CPI. And what is kind of leaning me towards the compensation committee a little bit is when we do our plans, we say, yeah, duh, we knew that, but we have the data. When we look at all of our staff as we do our bargaining, we look at a salary compensation. So I'm looking at that as, why would we look at it differently for ourselves? So I feel like it might be good to have, sorry staff, but a compensation committee so that this does actually take it out of our hands and it does really say what is logical. And I agree with you. I know that, locally and some other cities as well, we are paid a decent amount. And I look at it as, like you were sharing, Vice Mayor Marks, around the moderate income. I thought we were tying it to the moderate income at one point, and then it just didn't quite make it all the way. So based on the percentage of, half-time or three-quarters time. So I'll pass it back to Councilmember Pease.
And I was just going to note that that staff doesn't, for staff positions, we don't do a compensation study every 2 years or even every 4 years, right? It's a little bit more stretched out. I'm not sure what the best practice is. It seems like it's 5 or 6 years, which would kind of argue for let's do it next time. Just a thought on frequency more than anything.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Marks.
Yeah, I support what Councilmember Francis was saying about opening up the possibility of running to other people. I mean, to a wider spectrum of people. So, when I was first on the council, the mayor was retired. And so there were a number of retired council members. And then there was one council member who was just independently wealthy. And then there were professors who were able to manage their time in such a way that they could give a lot. I mean, to me, it's like volunteer work. That's how I approach it. But they had the flexibility, or like if you own your own practice, like I did and other people, you get along with the boss if you are the boss, and hopefully, and you can arrange your schedule. But if you have a job that requires you to punch a clock, it's very, very hard to free up the time that it takes to do this kind of very important community work. So I'm not sure that a compensation committee would actually make a recommendation for an increase, but I do think it needs to be looked at. And if you look at $20,000 a year, is that what we're paid right now, approx? 24, okay. So if we have a family of 4, and we were, so half of that, that would put us in the very low. I'm just,
It's equated with a half-time job. This is equated with a full-time job.
this is, I know, yeah. I divided it into,
Oh, I'm
I
sorry, I can't
didn't
see.
articulate that, I was doing that in my head. But, you know, if we're talking about a moderate, you know, so, anyway, it's just, it's something I've felt is very important. You know, and we don't want people running for office just because they think, oh, well, it's a job, I can, you know, it still is essentially community, you know, the passion to serve the community. But at the same time, if the time constraints are such that you can only work half-time outside of this position, then what does that do in terms of, I mean, who can afford to do that? So anyway, I'll just throw that out there.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
This is tough, as Councilmember Francis acknowledged. It's a super tough, complicated issue. I was just thinking about this earlier and thinking about the, you know, the diversity and equity implications of the pay, and so taking that into consideration and in coming up with my, you know, preferences right now is just feeling like, you know, like we looked at this relatively recently, and I feel like the committee at that point tried to do their best to come up with a pretty fair solution at the time. And I do appreciate that this doesn't go into effect until 2025. So it's a little bit more, there will be potentially, well, there will for sure be at least one new member on the council at that point. So it's not directly like we're, you know, really thinking all about ourselves. We're definitely not. I want to look at the big picture with the, in taking this into account. It's just really tough, and I don't want to distract the staff from the work program that we've already assigned to them to do, and it's a lofty program, and so I'm not terribly opposed to doing a compensation committee. I just think that it would be more valuable if we waited a little longer.
Thank you. Councilmember Pease.
Just so we can go one way or the other, I think I'm on the other side of where the majority is, but I'll go ahead and move that we move forward with a CPI increase rather than the compensation committee at this time.
Councilmember Shorsman.
I'll second that, but I don't know that that's where it's going either.
All right, well, no one else is lit up, so can we have roll call?
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yeah. Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
No.
Vice Mayor Marks?
No.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, I think we're just going to stick with CPI for now. And I appreciate you, Councilmember Pease, mentioning, you know, how often staff look at the bargaining agreements and their compensation. That really was helpful for me to kind of think about, okay, well, how often was that done? So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, so motion passes 3-2. And, oh, there's a quick comment from Councilmember Pease.
Thanks, and I know that we were concerned about work program, and it does seem like there is pretty good consensus that next round we want to include that. So just when we think about work program for next time, maybe if we could plan on that so that it's not disruptive.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Pease, we are prepared to do whatever action you asked us to do tonight, just to make that clear. It is a full team effort. And as you know, and talking to our HR team who does the compensation analysis, there's a lot of work with that. And so we'll certainly be prepared and hopefully can get ourselves fully staffed in the next time that this comes around. So we've got the full complement of professionals in HR and the clerk's office that can help out.
I hope so too. That would be great. And I appreciate you bringing that up too. I think it would be a really good idea at that point, because if we don't do it in 2 years, then we're going to be at 8 years and then we're way behind. So I think that, I think the CPI will help us kind of stick barely together, but I think that is important. And I think it's also remembering that it's not just about the salary, it's also about the other parts of this. While we also have added ARC and Planning Commission, I forget what year, but there's also other commissions that now seem to take more time than some used to take. And so maybe it's something to think about too, as we talk about the work plan for future. So, all right, so moving forward is the liaison reports. Any updates from anyone? I know for myself, I did attend the, what is it? Community Foundation 25th anniversary, which I noticed most of my colleagues were there as well. For the Community Foundation has done so much good work, and it was really great to see so many people there, but also being able to kind of like re-look at the millions of dollars they've given away to our community and really help them succeed. So, or helped our community succeed. And Shelley Stanwyck, the assistant city manager, being able to go to her farewell retirement party yesterday, which was, just in the park, which was perfect. We looked back at how long we've known each other since the early 90s, and it's just a wild experience to see people all retiring and, what happens next. So, all right, Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, it was really cool to see Shelley in sort of her element back there in front of the parks office there at Emerson Park to celebrate her retirement. Was at most of the things that the mayor was at. In addition, we both went to the Water Resource Recovery Facility. Staff put on a great tour there with some media and showed a lot of people who haven't gotten a chance to see that facility how great it is. And so really wonderful event, and hopefully actually already have gotten a little bit of media coverage out of that. So, and good to see some of the new things that have been put into operation since I toured last time that were just still being built. To see that happen and be working and functioning was great.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And I have to say too, being able to see, hear the process that's happened with the contractors and our staff and the collaboration, working with COVID and the challenges of construction at that time, and how much forethought was put into this process was really amazing. The one other thing I didn't mention is this Friday is our county mayor's monthly meeting, and we will be having one of our special guests is the Good Samaritan. So we'll be hearing a little bit more around how they run their villages in other locations, so we can understand how the county's Welcome Home Village will work potentially at the DSS spot here in SLO. So as determined in our December meeting, we are going to be skipping our August 1st meeting, as we typically do, as we have a little council break. And then we'll come back with a special closed session meeting on Monday the 14th. And then we'll be back here at August 15th with our regularly scheduled meeting. Have a great summer break and a great night. Thank you.
Thank you.